conduct an all-India roadshow specifically targeting women entrepreneurs. It's called the All India Roadshow for Empowering Women. And we were very lucky to, and we worked hard to win this very competitive grant. The idea of this grant is to empower young women in smaller Tier 2, Tier 3 cities. We seek everybody's collaboration and cooperation. We will be launching this in February and March. There are 5 cities that we have chosen. They are Durgapur, Nagpur, Warangal, Coimbatore, and Jaipur. And we will be selecting 25 young women in each city, introducing them to the concept of entrepreneurship as a career choice, and then amplifying this message. The premise is that women can actually make great entrepreneurs and can view entrepreneurship as a great career alternative and create economic value right where they exist and where they live, and can actually look at problems that are around them and then find solutions and make a great business while solving those problems. We are going to be collaborating with some US-based mentors, bringing them to India, so they may share their inspiration, their stories, their best practices, and inspire these women. 5 out of each 25, the participant pool of 25 are going to then be mentored remotely by women experts based in the United States. So we expect great collaboration. We are looking for great outcomes. And again, our hope is that this is the first baby step in a long journey which will result in greater entrepreneurial endeavors by women. So I encourage all of you to share the word, because we are really hoping to amplify the message. I do want to recognize 2 ladies in this room. Akhila Rajeshwar, if you could stand up, Akhila. Akhila's there. And we also have Sri Devi, Devi Reddy, Sri Devi. Akhila and Sri Devi are the co-directors of based in India, and they will be helping us guide and organize this road show. So again, we are looking for mentors. We are looking for mentees. Please help us spread this word, because I think if we are successful, we can really make this the first pilot of a long program. So with that said, actually I do want to recognize a couple of ladies that have flown from the US. I'd like to think it's for TiE. There's Smita Siddhanti in the audience, and she's been a big supporter of this project. And there's Komal, and there's actually Kanchana. So there's more than 2 or 3, and I'm forgetting a few names, I'm sorry. But all of them are here supporting this cause, so we are very excited about this project. So with that, speaking of mentors and speaking of women who have made a difference, it is a tremendous honor for me to be introducing to you someone who is at the brink of shaking up a very old industry. She has been called the Queen of the Electric Vehicle. All of you know of her, you've read of her. She has been an inspiration to many, many women, career women, professional entrepreneurs. She is Padmasree warrior, and I would like to have you join me in welcoming her. Padmasree is the CEO of NIO US. NIO US is the major initiative which is launching the electric vehicle car. She is the CEO of NIO US. She's also the brains behind all the intelligence that will go into NIO. Before that, you might recognize her from her trailblazing days at Cisco, where she was the Chief Technology Officer and the Chief Strategy Officer. And before that, prior to that, she was at Motorola as the Chief Technology Officer. If any one of you reads the newspaper, you've heard her name, read her name. She's been on so many lists that I would be consuming a lot of time, lists of powerful women, of technology movers and shakers. But instead of taking time and going through that whole list, I would like you to join me in welcoming Padmasree. Padmasree, if you can join us.
Can you guys hear me? Yeah? I think I might. Yeah. I just need my slides to come up. Great. Good afternoon. I'm Padmasree Warrior. I'm the CEO for a company in the Bay Area called NEO. NEO is an electric car company where we're working on autonomous EVs. So my last time at TiE was when I was Chief Technology and Strategy Officer for Cisco. I left Cisco about a year ago to join NEO. So it's a great pleasure to be back speaking to this audience. One of the things people always ask me is, why did I switch industries? Why did I go from being at the leading edge of a tech company where I was responsible for all the technology and strategy to go join an industry that's almost 125 years old, the automotive industry? And I joined, and I'm doing this mainly because I believe the car as we know it today is going to fundamentally change in the next decade. And I'll talk about why I believe that. Primarily, we will see a big shift that is going to occur in what we call cars today. Essentially similar to how we saw the mobile device change from a voice device to something much more than that. I think we all agree that no matter where we live or what job we do, technology has changed our lives and touched our lives in the last 2 decades. And out of all the technologies, probably 2 things that have really influenced all of us. One is the internet and the other is the mobile device. Well, in the next decade, for all of you entrepreneurs thinking about future opportunities, the next decade, the next 2 decades, the next 3 decades will be about a rise of a new platform that is also a mobile platform, but I'm not talking about apps or mobile devices. I'm talking about a different kind of a mobile device, and I call that Car 3.0. So in the next 15 minutes or so, I want to share my vision about what I mean by Car 3.0, how is that relevant to a market like India, and what would be some innovation opportunities for all of us. And then I'll take questions. So as I mentioned, I live in the Bay Area, specifically in Palo Alto, and I work in San Jose, which is south of where I live. That distance, according to Google Maps, which is never wrong, of course, is about 25 miles or so. And on a good day, it takes me 45 minutes to make that distance, cover that distance one way. So on a typical day, on a good day, I spend roughly 90 minutes just going to work and coming back from work. And that, to me, is a loss of my productivity of 10 weeks, roughly. So 10 weeks of my productive life, I'm spending doing nothing, basically sitting in a car doing nothing, being unproductive. And so this is a big cause of frustration for all of us, and it's actually a lot worse in India, specifically in Delhi and Bangalore, where part of my family still lives. I dread going to Bangalore because basically you can only do 1 meeting a day in Bangalore if you have to drive anywhere, because there's just no time to drive, right? And so it's not only that, that the commute is bad. In addition to that, there is a lot of injury that happens. Just this last month, I was rear-ended twice in my car. And my car, this is actually a real picture, by the way. It's not photoshopped. It's not something I took off of the internet. The red car on the left is my Tesla Model S. And the car that hit me the second time is the picture of the car on the other side. It was a Volkswagen Jetta. This happened on a freeway. Luckily for me, nobody was hurt. But in both instances, it was because the driver behind me was distracted. They were on their mobile phone, texting or doing what, I don't know. But the fact is that this happens to all of us. People are distracted. We as human beings are now becoming more distracted, more and more distracted, and this causes us to not pay attention to what we're doing when we're driving. And so although there may not be injury, and by the way, there is a lot of injury and death due to traffic-related accidents, it's still a hassle. And so how do we change all of this? So part of my personal reason for joining and doing the startup is to change all of this. And there is technology that allows us to change this today. And so this is the belief that I have, and that's what I call Car 3.0. So why do people buy cars? If this is a pain, why don't we just use public transportation or ride share? Because fundamentally, people equate mobility with freedom, right? When we actually punish people, we imprison them and take freedom away from them. So as human beings, we always desire and long for that mobility. And so mobility is something that people always aspire to. And increasingly, according to McKinsey, by 2030, 60% of the world's population is going to live in cities. And so cities are only going to get larger and more dense and more crowded. And in cities, as people are becoming more mobile, this is going to create problems for us. But this is something we all desire to have. The first thing we do when we get a job and have a paycheck is to buy cars, right? And so this, or wheels, whether it's a car or a motorcycle. So that's the desire we have for mobility. Cars also, by the way, and mobility equates, and for a long time has contributed to societal progress, whether it's transportation of goods or just moving people around or traveling for leisure. All of these contribute to the economies and will continue to do so. And so this is why one of the reasons why people will continue to buy cars and vehicles. And cars are aspirational, right? It's one consumer product. In the US, people spend roughly 30% of their income on buying a car. And in India and China, that number is somewhere from 100% to 180%. So we're willing to actually spend more than we earn to have a product that is very aspirational because it says who we are. It is the most aspirational consumer product today in the market. And people love cars, right? When we're little kids, we play with little cars. And that desire to own that and have that as a toy stays with us as we get older. So what's the problem? If cars are so great and we desire to have them, they help us, they help the society. The problem is, and according to Morgan Stanley, vehicles are the most polluting, the most underutilized, the most dangerous weapons on the roads. They actually call these weapons. And why is that? If you look at pollution worldwide, cars and trucks contribute nearly 20% of the emissions, 45% of the demand for refined fuel, fossil fuel, is through vehicles, cars, and light trucks. And 70 gallons of refined product per person annually is consumed by vehicles. So definitely contribute a lot to pollution. I have data about Delhi. When I come to Delhi now in the winter, and by the way, I went to school in this city many years ago now. It wasn't like this. Nowadays, when I get up, I look out the window, and you really can't see anything, right? A lot of that is contributed. Much of that comes from cars. Not all of it, but much of that. Cars also create death and accidents, and I know I personally experienced this. In the U.S., roughly 100 lives are lost every day due to auto-related accidents. In India, that number was 146,000. 146,000 deaths last year, and that number went up from the year before. And in China, it's 200,000 deaths annually. So these numbers are incredible, and every day these numbers are actually going up, not coming down. And you ask yourself, we've made so much progress with technology. Why is this happening, right? This is all very preventable. So there's loss, there's injury, there's pollution, and there's wasted time. Globally, people spend commuting, which equates to loss of productivity, roughly 130 billion minutes per day. In the US, 136 million Americans commute 26 minutes a single way, so roughly an hour every day, right? Which equates to loss of productivity of billions of minutes in a year. And 3.4 million Americans commute 90 minutes one way. So that's roughly 3 hours a day, which means 1 month in a year, they're just sitting in the car, not doing anything. In India, on an average, people commute 100 to 120 minutes one way. So that's roughly also about a month or month and a half of our lives lost where we're not doing anything. So this is, to me, the biggest opportunity for all of us. A lot of GDP loss, by the way, happens because of this loss of productivity and loss of life. And it's not just loss of productivity. When people are stuck in traffic, there is data that was conducted by Pew Research that says it actually causes lots of health issues. We're more stressed out, blood pressure issues, diabetes is on the rise because we tend to eat more junk food when we're sitting in a car with nothing to do, stuck in traffic, depression, anxiety, stress. So it causes a lot of health issues as well. So these are the problems that we can solve. So the car industry, right, and I'm not sure, is anyone here who's working in the traditional automotive industry? Mostly all tech people. So I'm safe to say this, whereas in Detroit I have to be more careful. So to me, the car industry is a very old industry. It's a 125-year-old industry. I would say car 1.0, as I call it, which is probably from 1900s to 1970s. The automotive industry main innovation was in mechanical and hydraulic systems. They did have a lot of innovation, cars got better, but a lot of the innovation was in mechanical and hydraulic systems. Then we saw from the 70s to now the rise of electronic components in the cars. And actually when I was at Motorola Semiconductor, we worked on ECUs, and actually the car industry made up a word for it. They call it mechatronics, which is a made-up word. It's basically mechanical and electronic systems combined together. And they have another made-up word called infotainment, which is information and entertainment. So if you're coming from the tech industry, these words are very strange to you. And that's because the industry was primarily a mechanical hydraulic system industry. That's what the engineers did. And we are now seeing the rise of something that I call Car 3.0, which is really going to be all about software and digital systems. It's not very different from how the computer industry evolved, by the way. The computer industry, if you've been in the industry for a long time, in the beginning was mainframe. Mainframe computers were all about hardware. So engineers that worked on this were hardware engineers, and very few people had access to these computers. And then came the PC revolution, right, which gave us operating system applications, client-server model, and then we saw cloud computing, which is much more distributed, much more affordable. So the computer industry went through 3 phases as well, from mainframes to PCs to cloud computing. And the mobile industry went through 3 phases. The mobile industry, which is where I grew up, was originally a voice device. Cell phones were primarily to make voice calls. And then we saw smartphones, right, Android, and the rise of Android and iOS, which gave us access to the mobile internet. Now it's going to another revolution called the personal assistant, whether that's Cortana or Siri or Google Now or Alexa from Amazon. Nobody knows who the leader is going to be, but we're all like trying to push to that future. So every industry goes through these big transformations, and when these transformations happen, 3 things change. First, the fundamental skill sets change. In the computer industry, we went from hardware to operating systems to applications. In the mobile industry, we went from voice. RF engineers were really the hottest commodity in the mobile industry back when we were making just voice devices, to the OS and actually created the whole app ecosystem, to when we go to, I think the panel before me was talking about artificial intelligence, and the gentleman was saying, I hate that word because everybody calls themselves a AI company. And the reason for that is AI is actually becoming much more of a platform. So these industry shifts happen where skill sets change and old companies die and new companies become more popular. So the car industry is going to go through that same thing, where we will see a big shift from electronic systems and mechanical systems to digital systems. And notice I call it digital systems and not software. Why is that? Because, car, you have to think of, when you think of the car as a computer, you have to think of the full stack. So it's not just software, it's actually software-defined hardware. So the kinds of software we're going to develop on EVs as a platform is going to dictate what the hardware needs to be. And so you do need to have that connection between the software and the hardware. So that's kind of what I refer to as Car 3.0. So Car 3.0, the vehicles will hopefully all be in the next 10 years are going to be safe, because they will actually know when to not have accidents or not rear-end the person. Even if you're distracted, the car will have sensors that will detect the vehicle ahead of you and stop. And so they'll be much safer than they are today. They will be green. I firmly believe EVs are the right solution. And they will be a lot more personalized, right? Today the car is it has a lot of compute capability, but really doesn't know you as a person. Whereas your personal device that you carry in your pocket knows who you are, knows your preferences. So we can change all of this. This is all the innovation we can bring from the mobile world into the vehicle world, and thinking the car as a robot or thinking of the car as a computer. So that's what we call full stack. So we have to develop the Car 3.0, the car of the future, as if it's a computer, as if it's a robot. And we have to innovate every layer. At the base layer is the powertrain. So the powertrain in the future has to be fail operational, meaning it will always allow you to come to a safe stop, even when sensors fail or the car fails. So you'll never be stuck in the middle of a road. It'll actually allow you always to pull up to the side of the road. And then the vehicle itself has to be innovated and thought of very differently. On top of that, we have the vehicle network. The network in the car is like a dial-up modem. Anybody remember a dial-up modem and how slow it used to be? So we have to move that, move the vehicle from being a dial-up modem world into the Ethernet world where you can actually do things much more instantaneously. Imagine if your phone, your mobile device, you couldn't get updates over the air, where you had to take your cell phone or your smartphone to a dealership to get updates. Imagine if you had to do that. That's really what it is like in the automotive world. So we need to change that and modernize the network in the vehicle. And then on top of that, we have to build data platform, all the data that we're going to collect about the car, about the people in the car, what they're doing, so that we can personalize things. And then the infotainment world is actually going to change to something that I call a digital cockpit, where the experiences we have will be more similar to how you would use your iPad or any kind of a smart intelligent compute device in your hand. And so there's lots of opportunity for us to be really thinking about the user interface and the user experience. So the stack of how cars get built will change dramatically. And in addition to that, there's a whole data platform. So all of the things that we've learned in the cloud space, in the mobile space about data, how to manage the data, now the data is actually going to be almost 10x from the vehicles because there's going to have lots of cameras, a lot more sensors, and then we have to build a cybersecurity platform so people cannot hack into the vehicle. And so this is the full stack that we have to innovate around. And this allows us all to be really thinking of the entire, imagine how much innovation we've driven on the mobile platform in the last decade. It's almost like 10x that in the next decade if you think of the vehicle as a car. So I tell my team in the Bay Area, we're not building cars, we're building robots that look like cars. So it's a very different paradigm, right? Something that actually is smart and that's capable of making decisions on its own and allows you to actually be a better driver. Those are the things that we could do. So as I was mentioning, we have a team in Silicon Valley. We currently have about 250 people working on this. We bring people from, in order to do this full stack, you need skill sets that are really broad and deep. We need mechanical engineers, we need electrical engineers, we need people who understand computer vision, machine learning, artificial intelligence. We need power people, people who build motors and inverters that generate the torque to power the car. It's really a broad skill set that you need to do this, and it's very exciting. So this is our office space in Silicon Valley. We've just launched about a month ago a supercar to prove the technology. That's the NIO EP9. It's a picture of the car that we launched. We are now the fastest EV in the world. We broke the record in Germany on a track at Nürburgring. So thank you. We're very proud of that. That car was actually built in 18 months from scratch. We had nothing 18 months ago. And it's all EV. It's not a hybrid vehicle. It's full EV. And you can see the numbers there on how fast it can go, how fast it can do the laps. We broke the record both in Germany as well as in Paris. So we're looking, this is a collector's edition car. It's really not for all of us to drive because it's a very fast car, but it's mainly to prove that EVs can actually be performance vehicles and EVs can actually be those very desirable consumer products that we could all want. Because many people think about electric vehicles as little golf carts that will just take you here and there, and I think that world is changing very rapidly. So what is the opportunity for India, and why am I here? So I think there's big opportunity for India. If you look at air quality numbers, and if you're from Delhi, you probably know this, November 7th, New Delhi really had AQI numbers that was the most polluted city by orders of magnitude. You literally had to wear gas masks if you were to have that kind of air quality index every single day. Luckily, it's come down since then, but this was a very particularly bad day for us here. These are pictures I pulled off of what Delhi was like, or what Delhi is like now. By the way, and I said I went to school here many, many years ago, and this is not the Delhi I remembered. My dream would be to bring Delhi back to the way it was when I was going to school here years ago, where the air was clean. Winters were actually the most spectacular time to be in Delhi. It was beautiful. We would actually, as students, I went to IIT Delhi We would sit out in the lawns and really enjoy. We would actually cut classes so we could sit out on the lawns. It was so pretty, right? Now I would be terrified to sit out in the lawns because I would be breathing essentially toxic gases. So another picture of Delhi when it's polluted. And so actually nowadays I can't even take pictures of Delhi because all I get is smog. So let's change that. That's a big opportunity we have, and we should be able to change this. And this actually just read in the paper. I landed in New Delhi on Thursday, and my husband and I, were walking, and he picked up the newspaper, and the headline I saw. So in addition to pollution, Delhi is actually losing the race against traffic. Apparently, commute times have gone up dramatically in the last couple of years in New Delhi. And here's data. You can see the various routes. I hope none of you have to take these routes. This is the increase in time that it's taking in the last 2 to 3 years, and how much people are having to spend going from point A to point B. And this is a World Health Organization report. I just picked this up from Wall Street Journal. This article came out on December 12th, so very recent data. That's a map of the world's most unclean places. So if it's red, that means the air quality index is bad. So look at India on that map. There is no green spot. You see the bad or very bad? The southern part of India is a little bit better, but northern part of India is all very dark red. So our children are actually breathing in all these pollutants that are going to cause major diseases related to lungs and breathing, right? And so this is the opportunity, and it shouldn't be this way. We can solve this. And by the way, there's numbers about how many people around the world, 3 million people die a year because of air quality index related diseases. So that's that we can solve. So the big opportunity for us here is to really bring smart electric vehicles that will not only address the pollution problem, that actually make us more productive. When we're commuting, and maybe we won't be able to solve hunger and fix all of the traffic related issues, because I just told you McKinsey expects that cities will only get more populated. But what we could do is the time spending in commute where we're not doing anything, can we be productive? Can we use that time as meditative? And we've done a lot of research, and this is a worldwide problem. We've done a lot of research in the US where people actually say, I don't mind being in the car as long as I'm being productive in the car, where I'm not just stuck in traffic with pollution and not having to do anything, but can I use that time to talk to my parents that I haven't talked to in a while, or talk to my friends, or make phone calls for work where I'm actually not doing. We actually call this the Bermuda Triangle. You're trying to look at the street, and you're trying to look at the screen in the car, and you're trying to look at the cell phone, right? It's illegal in the US to operate your cell phone or look at your cell phone when you're driving. So what do people do? They actually put it here and look at it, which is worse than having it here. And so we need to solve all of that. Can we have voice-activated devices where the car actually can talk to you? So these kinds of things, technologies exist. We just need to bring it into the automotive world. And so as technologists and as entrepreneurs, that's the opportunity that I hope we all take. Nothing against mobile apps, but I would rather have the best brains in the world working on problems like what I just talked about. Let's bring our cities back to be where they're clean. Let's use technology to give our lives back, and not let's use technologies to take lives, which is what it's doing. So that's the aspiration we have at NEO. We say in our company, it's not about driving. Cars should be about being. It's not about driving. When you're in your car, you should feel like this is the best place I want to be. So imagine a world sometime 15 years from now, maybe 5 years from now, we're actually looking forward to that commute, because it's the best time that you're going to have is when you're in the car, you're calm, you're listening to music, you can be zen, you can be meditative, you can be productive. That's the world we have an opportunity to create, and that's the journey we are on. Thank you so much.
This is great. Padma, this is so visionary. And for somebody who's lived in Michigan for 21 years, the future that you show us is amazing. We will open it. We have a few minutes for Q&A. There are 2 mics. If we can encourage you to get in behind the mics. While they're walking, I will tell you one quick snippet of of history, and I shared this with you, when Billy Durant, the founder of General Motors, went to J.P. Morgan seeking funding for his then startup General Motors, J.P. Morgan famously said, "I cannot think of a world where people move from point A to point B in anything other than horse-drawn buggies." Mm-hmm. So now we are in a connected vehicle, and it's very impressive that you've shared with this vision with us. While I will since there's an eager audience here, I'll let them go, but I do have my own questions. But why don't we start with the young man there, and then I'll chime in with my questions. I think that microphone might not be on, if you want to turn it on. Is that coming on?
Yeah, I think it's on.
It's on now.
Yeah. I'm Amit. I would like to ask how Car.3 would affect companies like Uber, Ola going forward.
And companies like what?
Uber and Ola.
And Ola.
Ola, okay.
And the second part is, particularly for India, people here do self-drive, but a lot of people have chauffeurs-driven cars. So how does those people get affected by Car 3.0?
Yeah. So Car 3.0 is an evolution of the vehicle. You know, how you use that vehicle, whether you're going to use it as a ride share, on-demand, taxi, ownership, it doesn't matter. You know, it's what that product is that's going to change, right? You know, so today you have many different brands of cars, and you know, an Uber provides you a ride share in any of those cars. And so imagine, but those cars are polluting the environment. So imagine if all those cars were electric cars, and many of those cars are very advanced in terms of what they can see. They can actually see better than a human driver can see. That's the opportunity. Uber is also working on self-driving cars or autonomous cars. So I don't think it's not, I mean, those are all consumption models in how we would consume the product, whether it's ride share or you have a chauffeur or you don't have a chauffeur. Yeah, I think India, you know, a lot of people have chauffeurs, but a lot of people don't have chauffeurs. And so the opportunity is, how do you make the car safe, whether it's someone driving you or you're driving yourself. So that's the opportunity we have. It's the product itself, not the consumption.
Thank you. Do you have another question?
Yeah, it's both. So a fully autonomous car, if you have lots of sensors and cameras and LiDARs and radars, puts out roughly 4 terabytes of data every day. So it's a huge amount of data. So you can't push all of that real time, and you don't need to push all of that real time to the data center, to the cloud. So in a way, in the car of the future, you'll have a mini data center in the car, but a lot of that data is handled real time. And then a lot of data you collect, you push to the cloud, because it doesn't need to be real time. And so you have to do both, and the trick is in partitioning what parts get handled where. And that's our secret sauce. You know, one of the things we are working on is actually the data platform itself. You have to ingest all this data, and so that the data scientists can write algorithms on the data that you've collected, right? You know, so the Google self-driving car today, for example, dumps all the data into the cloud once the car gets plugged in. One of the things we are looking at is doing a combination of both.
Hi. Hello.
Hello.
Go ahead.
Padmasree, this is Naren Bakshi from Silicon Valley. So I have met you, of course. I have a question that will help audience also push government. So what should happen soon, I hope, that at least few hundred cars like Tesla, Google, they get imported in India, and they are available for people to observe, see, so that all of the people that want to do something will benefit from it. So can we all work towards trying to find some way to at least get models in India?
Sure. I mean, as soon as our car is built, we're actually already talking to some potential partners that we'd like to use India as a market. I think definitely, why not?
And actually, building off of what Naren said, Padma, the price point, and in fact, I was reading a survey which said that about 56% of consumers said that they would switch car models, and they may have used Fords and General Motors forever, but they would switch because the other car might have better technology. But another significant 48% said that if the price point was too high, or if there were too many buttons and gadgets that confused them because they wouldn't know what to use that car for, would not use them. So what are your views on making it affordable and relevant?
Yeah, the biggest cost in an EV today is the battery and the battery pack. That is roughly about half the BOM. And the battery costs are coming down as volume comes up. So I think in the next 4 years, the battery cost will come down quite dramatically. So the EVs are already, quite affordable. I think it depends on, autonomous vehicles are not yet there because the sensors and LiDARs are still expensive. So that will come later. But I think there's a lot of things we could do before we get to full autonomy to help us become better drivers as well. I think the point you're making is, when we ask people today, if you buy a premium car, right, whatever the car is, what do you get? You get black leather, chrome buttons, and lots of buttons. That's it. You don't get anything. And so that's not a premium experience. What people consider, nowadays, premium experience is give me my time back. People don't have time. And so whatever we do to help their life get better, people are willing to pay for that. But I think this is a shift the auto industry needs to go through. Premium is not more buttons. Premium is actually how does the technology hide itself and give you what you need to do. One of the things I talk about, it's not apps. You have to think of the world beyond apps, right? It's actually intelligent services, not apps. Apps are, too many apps confuse you. You probably have no idea how many apps you have on your mobile device. How often do you use all of them? But an intelligent service that understands what your problems are and helps you solve that, that's personalization. I think those things are opportunity for us to change. By the way, an EV actually has much less moving parts, so it's much less maintenance. There's nothing to, you don't have emissions testing. There's no transmission. There's no complicated engine. Lots of things are much simplified, so it allows us to, as a startup, build an EV. So you can actually build a platform much simpler than a regular ICE.
Yes, hello.
Hi.
Hello.
I'm Saurabh Jain from...
Sorry, I think we're being told we're out of time.
Yeah, we're out of time.
We'll make time for one last question. But
I have an idea.
Let's not get into a shouting match. Maybe we can organize some more time with Padmasree outside, but please go ahead.
When will EVs come to Delhi? Yesterday, the Uber founder said that EVs would not be able to come to Delhi due to the traffic conditions here. So,
no, I don't think those two are related. I think we just have to replace the current cars with EVs. So we have to set up the EV charging.
So autonomous EVs, not the
autonomous EVs is much harder. I think autonomous EV is probably longer because it's much harder when you have people not following rules for the computer to figure out it out. So I would say probably that maybe by 2025. But EVs should be here very soon.
Okay,
on that note, a very warm round of applause, please, for Padmasree and for taking the time out to come and speak with us. Thank you very much. It's also fascinating to see since this morning how many people have raised the topic of pollution in Delhi, how it is life-threatening and how something needs to be done about it. Maybe this is one of those ecosystems or environments where we will find an entrepreneur who will go out and do that. Thank you again very much for that, Padmasree. Quick programming note for what's happening all around the rest of our little ecosystem, so you know what's up. There is a conversation about numbers happening in Shah Jahan Hall. That's happening with the Deloitte group, in case you want to catch that. We've also got a small and intimate conversation on ideation for innovators, and that's happening in Mumtaz Hall. So for anyone who wants to talk a little bit more about ideation and finding the right idea for an entrepreneur, that's happening in Mumtaz. A conversation about numbers with people from Deloitte as well happening in Shah Jahan. And coming up right now is an interesting conversation about fintech and how to incorporate that for the entrepreneurial community. So may I invite on stage Alok Mittal, who's co-founder of Indici Technologies, and he's going to get the rest of his group up for this.
Okay, great. Maybe we'll.
Thank you. I would like to invite my fellow panelists, Shrikant Nadamuni. He's the CEO and co-founder at Khosla Labs. Also, works very closely with some of the investee companies, notably NovoPay at this point. Ritesh Pai, who runs the digital for Yes Bank, and Chaitra, who's the co-founder at Simple.
Yeah, I'm Sasha.
Thanks everyone for joining me on the panel. So would love to kind of just start with a round of introductions. You can explain what is it that you are doing, especially in the fintech space. That'll get us started.
I'm Shrikant Nadamuni. I run Khosla Labs, a startup incubator that Vinod Khosla and I started a few years ago. We do a bunch of companies. One of them, which is sort of relevant to this discussion, is NovoPay, which is a mobile payments and banking company, which basically gives a Android app to Kirana stores with a Aadhaar biometric scanner that makes them a banker, an ATM machine, a POS machine, and some more. We have about 40,000 of them across 20 states, and that's a very exciting business that we're looking at. Prior to Khosla Labs, I was the head of technology for Aadhaar, set up the technology center in Bangalore, and got it to about $600 million before I left, working closely with Nandan. Prior to that, I was in the United States for many years, 15 years in Silicon Valley. I'm a chip designer, did CPU design at Intel, Sun Microsystems, built some internet companies in the Bay Area. That's my background.
Thanks. Hello. Yeah. So at Yes Bank, if we were to see before a couple of banks which recently went live, Bandhan and IDFC to be very precise, we were the youngest bank in India till that time. Why we are very keen to work with startups is because if you look at our journey since 2004, we were actually a total greenfield venture. I mean, we were the only bank that started without any legacy per se. So, and that's where we feel that we can actually relate to the psyche of a startup in a much better way than compared to any other banks. The other reason that we see synergies in working with some of these startups nowadays is purely because of the patterns that we are seeing. It's becoming a very, very entrepreneurial economy that we are seeing. In Yes Bank parlance, we call it DICE, so Design, Innovation and Creativity-led Entrepreneurship, which means that the earlier mindset of being very methodical, practical, theory-driven, that has taken a backseat, and now the creative side of entrepreneurship is now taking precedence, which is actually in sync with what our thought process has been. I mean, Yes Bank, since the day of inception, has always focused on innovation, challenging the assumptions, creating solutions which people would not have ventured into, and hence I feel that because of that particular linkage, we are able to better work with a lot of startups. And I guess as the discussion progresses, we can also talk about what are the infrastructure that we have developed and what are the other bespoke solutions that we have created for startups, which encourages them to work with Yes Bank as compared to some of our peer groups.
My name is Chaitra. I am the co-founder of Simple, Get Simple Technologies. We have a payment product. It's an anti-wallet, anti-card. So we make payments one click based on credit assessment of the individual, which is, and the credit decision is made real time at the point of sale. We have, currently we are live on about 15 merchants with 30 more in the pipeline coming online in the next couple of months. Book My Show is our largest merchant as of now, and currently we process more transactions per day on Book My Show than the largest wallet in India. So it's been a phenomenal journey for us so far, because the product is has a revolutionary take on payments. It's built on trust, and the way we look at it, me and my co-founder Nitya, our approach has been that if a payments product were invented today, what would be the building blocks of that product, and how would it operate, what benefits would it offer to the stakeholders that it serves. So we think that one thing that's changed between the 1950s and the 2000s is the internet revolution that's happened, and more recently the smartphone revolution. What it essentially means is real time, as a computer connected to the internet gets to know the location of a person, certain personally identifiable details of the individual and the device in their hands, using which a microcredit decision can be made on the individual to lubricate a transaction that they are trying to make at that point in time. This did not exist 50 years back, and therefore you had Visa, MasterCard, which was based on a centralized system. What we are building is Visa, MasterCard 2.0, which is based on a decentralized system. So the way Simple would look 5 years from now is we would be a payments platform processing all payments for merchants, and consumers could pay for all their purchases with one click, add them all to one tab, which they clear once in 2 weeks or once in 30 days. We'll give them that flexibility. So essentially we are not doing anything new. It's the Khata system that most of us are used to with our local grocer. We have just made it available online and across merchants.
Great. So we're going to... Go ahead. So we're going to focus the discussion today more on what are the opportunities that are coming upstream in the fintech space. And there are really 2 or 3 different dimensions to approach it from. There's clearly stuff happening on the technology side. India Stack is a large part of that. There is stuff that's happening on the regulatory side, and then the data element. So we'll just go through that in that order. Shrikant, you want to take the first stab at just explaining what's going on at India Stack? I think most of us are familiar with the basic components of that. But where is it headed? What should we expect in the next 6 to 12 months as far as India Stack is concerned?
Well, so I think the origins of India Stack was when the team put together Aadhaar. We understood a few things. We understood that technology, when it's designed in a very simple way and implemented, can have a tremendous impact on the country, and we're seeing that right now. Over 1 billion people have completed Aadhaar enrollments, and now various applications are coming up, whether it is NREG, PDS earlier, which were government applications, now a lot of them in the banking and financial services space and so on. So it taught us that we can actually implement extremely good technology at India scale. It hadn't been done in that scale with that level of quality of service in the government earlier, okay? And I don't mean just the Indian government. Even if you take international, many governments, they're still amazed at the quality at which it was implemented ahead of schedule, right? So that taught us a few things, that if we can lay standards for other areas and implement it India scale, the return on investment is phenomenal. And when I mean the ROI, I mean the impact it can have is enormous. So the very next thing, and right while we were doing Aadhaar, we were acutely aware of the financial inclusion problems across the country, and we were working closely with the RBI, with the Indian Banking Association and so on, and in fact ensured that the Aadhaar eKYC was the bank KYC and the Aadhaar eKYC was the trade KYC and so on and so forth. Those sort of deep dive verticals into specific sectors like banking and financial services enabled for that team to understand what the key challenges were in that space. So the next step was, can we go deeper and build standards? UPI came out of that team. And in a very simple way, if I were to think of what UPI does, it is hard for one entity to do both supply and demand, as in do acquisition and issuing and create the market on a digital platform. You ought to be very, very large, or you have to take decades like Visa and Master, right? If you want to enable merchants, providers of solutions to merchants to plug into a standard system so that all consumers or a large number of consumers can come to those merchants, or on the other side, if you want to enable consumers because you're a company that works on the consumer side, but yet plug into an ecosystem where all merchants will accept your payment digitally, that's what UPI does. UPI makes it easy for you to just say, I want to plug in, as opposed to saying, I will create both sides of the system, which is very expensive, very tedious and hard. Of course, it does it through a bank account as opposed to a wallet. You mentioned that an anti-wallet company. That's a sort of very telling thing about your company. I don't think people are here to get more wallets. We all have half a dozen bank accounts probably, and I don't think we enjoy having more accounts and more statements landing up at home. We are forced to open those bank accounts, and we do. Nothing personal with Ritesh, but with that. Well, but now having another half a dozen wallets where we park in 5,000 here, 3,000 there to pay for Uber and pay for movie tickets is not my idea of fun. So I think UPI removes that intermediate buffer and just gets it to the bank account, which I think is the right way to go about it. So, I mean, to cut a long story short, so UPI does those things. The next few steps that I'm seeing is, of course, e-signature. All of us who file taxes or directors of companies, we have this little dongle with our, key, digital key, and we go put it into our laptop and sign our documents, whether it's income tax or whatever. Actually, we don't do it. Our accountant does it, right? None of us do this. We'll call it and he'll say, can I use it, sir? And he'll say, yeah, go ahead and sign it and send my... That's what we are. Why do we do that? That's because even people in this room can't deal with the dongle and sign documents. That's why. Okay? I mean, I was part of the Pentium design team, so I understand technology, but I still can't sign a document. That's the reality of it, or it's painful. You've got to figure it out. So what eSign did was, he said, okay, we all understand fingerprint. For 250 years, we've been doing fingerprint to sign on documents, stamp paper, whatever. Everybody culturally, socially, we understand fingerprint. Why don't you just sign the document using a fingerprint scanner? Because now India understands fingerprint scanners like nobody else does. In the system, you do whatever gobbledygook of signing it digitally, which is exactly what the standard does. It takes your fingerprint, fetches a digital certificate, signs that document on the fly, and it complies with the IT Act, right? But on the front end, we all get it. Imagine telling a villager, if we can't do this, imagine telling a villager that use a dongle and it'll digitally sign a document, and now you lost most of the people. So that's what eSign is coming out of the India Stack team. Similarly, various things they are looking at. Next, the consent architecture. A lot of our data is sitting in hospitals, it's sitting in banks, it's sitting in different places. Who owns that data? If I want to share that data, my medical records to the next doctor that I go to, can I do it? So there's a consent architecture that the India Stack team is working on. So several of these ideas, I think, were born out of the confidence that we can build India-scale products, government can standardize it, and ensure that a whole ecosystem develops around it.
Shikan, just to follow up on that, so you raised a question and then you moved on from who owns the data. And at least the way a consent architecture is built up is neutral to that, right? But Ritesh, you might have seen some of the account aggregator guidelines and so on, which are trying to cement the notion that the service provider owns my data. Where do you think this is headed, right? Where should we go with the ownership of data that belongs to the customer? Does the bank own my data, or I've just given them permission to manage my account? Does the hospital own my data, right? And then what are the privileges I have with respect to that data? Can I share it openly with someone, or do I have to pay the bank to share my statement with someone?
Well, I don't think all those questions have been answered yet, but it is worth looking at those, because whether it is my data or my data resides with someone else who's a service provider for me, there might be more users of that data to me and to other parties in the ecosystem, right? And if there is a fair way to share that data, then maybe we are unlocking value in the economy. Okay, that's what comes to my mind. Now, exactly in each instance, who owns the data, who has the rights to the data, is not clear, and it will work itself out. But the consent architecture allows the owner, whoever that person is, give rights to that data to another person and say, you go ahead and use that. It could be that, hey, whatever, Manipal hospital has my some records, and I want to give it to some other doctor who's close by, then I ought to be able to do that. I'm just giving you one use case. There could be many use cases along financial transactions, health transactions, education, certificates, so on and so forth. But I think anything that unlocks value, and another technology I forgot to talk about that is part of the India stack is the digital locker. And in fact, R.S. Sharma talks very nicely of it. He was my boss at UID. He was the Director General of UID. He says, you go and get a birth certificate from one arm of the government, some municipal agency or whatever, and then you go and apply for something else in another arm of the government, and then they say, give me the birth certificate. So you produce the birth certificate. Now they ask the question, is that genuine? So get it signed by somebody else to say it is genuine. But you gave it to me on the side, and you're asking me on that side, is this genuine? So how does it make sense? And it creates a lot of hurdles for people, right? So the way he explained it was very nice. He said, what if you're the guy who's giving me birth certificate? I tell you, you put it in a locker for me, in your own government locker, maybe. And then when I can't go to him and say, I need some other, give me a certificate for something else, where he needs the birth certificate, I give him the right to see it and say, it's there. And by the way, it's the government's locker itself. I didn't do anything to the locker, or I didn't create any document. You yourself see it, it's there. I give you consent. Very powerful idea. Suddenly, a lot of the hurdles go away, because you suddenly build trust into the system by creating a drop box, if you will, where people can put documents and so on. I don't know if I answered the question fully, but I think it's very case by case. You have to work out who owns the data.
Ritesh, coming back to the UPI piece, right? There's been angst in the banking system regarding, how easy was it to run wallets, and that difference in consumer experience perhaps allowed the wallets to prosper. With the UPI coming along, is that answered? Do you now think that banks are going to strike back and take their share of payments back away from the wallets? How are you guys viewing the UPI versus wallet situation?
So if you were to ask me, from a Yes Bank standpoint, we never considered them as competition. Okay, we always, if you see, we have given enough and more examples of how there can be coexistence. But there is a misconception that UPI can replace wallets. Okay, UPI is an interoperable platform which has been created. If you were to look at it in the last 3 to 4 years, to be very precise, NPCI has come up with a lot of solutions on an interoperable platform. Some of these are also part of the India stack, including the eKYC, the AEPS, the NAT, CTS, IMPS, now BBPS going live, which is the bill payment. So all these interoperable platforms give you a common platform where you can start building more use cases around it, right? So UPI is a method of payment, just like how a IMPS is, or how you end up doing a bill payment or a RuPay card or a NFS ATM transaction. Wallet players can be consumers of UPI as well. So, as we speak, many of the wallet players have integrated UPI as a mechanism for loading funds into the wallets. See, today all the wallets that existed, okay, with due respects, okay, they were all fragmented. They were never interoperable. So I cannot transfer money from one wallet to another wallet. Or, if there were some good features in one particular wallet, not necessarily the one which I am using also had those. So you end up using 3, 4, and of course, cashback being one of them. I'm keeping the element of greed aside. I'm talking about only the element of need out here. So UPI can technically be one of the functions which a wallet can use to load money. Typically, all wallets today, if you look at it, were loading money through either a bank account. That is either using an internet banking debit card or a credit card, right? So the source of funds was always coming through some organized banking account that existed, right? doing away with a 2FA or a stored value product, I wouldn't compare that as a big threat to the banking services, because banks tend to do much more than only payments, right? I mean, there's the lending solution, there is the investment part of it, the insurance, the treasury business. There's so many aspects that a bank ends up doing. So wallet was just addressing a small subset of payments within it. And payments is such a subjective term in India that in spite of so many methods of payment still being there, we are still scratching the surface at only around 7 or 8% of transactions happening in an electronic format. I mean, this I'm talking pre-demonetization. I'm assuming post-demonetization the percentage would have increased. But from a Yes Bank perspective, we always had a very collaborative approach. I mean, our partnership with the Freecharge or our partnership with the PhonePe, and these are big names which are known. There are many such entities whom we have powered. Typically, by following the India stack architecture, we have ourselves invested in a enterprise service bus. I mean, that's our sandbox that we have created, where startups can actually come, plug in, and start testing their products. So it has all the possible APIs that exist, right from eKYC to your PAN authentications to CIBIL score validations, IMPS, NEFT, UPI, you name it. So whoever wants to come and construct, we are more than happy to partner. Selectively, we play the role where we feel that we can drive the product in a better way. We end up becoming the face. In case we feel our partners can do a better job at it, we end up playing the role of an enabler. So we never saw this as a competition, or we never saw this as a threat to us. We have always believed in co-creating solutions. We have always looked at building synergies. We have always looked at innovating and trying to...
So just coming back to the UPI question, right?
Yeah.
So there is now buzz for UPI 2.0.
Yeah.
What is your list of things that you would like to see in UPI? What's missing? What do you expect to happen in the next 1 year?
So, couple of things. So, there have been a lot of debates that have already happened in the steering committee meetings that we have been discussing. A couple of things which are immediate need of the hour is that today UPI caters to only smartphones. So, the one request which has gone is to make it more inclusive by getting even the feature phones into the mainstream. So, there is thought process going around that direction. The second is, while it is taking care of the push and pull both, and when I'm saying push and pull, it's both proximity and non-proximity payments, it is not taking care of recurring payments. So that is another thing that is being worked upon. Hopefully by March, that solution should also be in place, where any kind of standing instructions or repeat payments which need to be done, typically EMI collections, SIPs, ULIPs, all of that, those things. I think these two, if taken care, will almost address 90% of the issues that we have around payments. The last may be trying to get credit cards also into it, because today it's only catering to bank accounts. Maybe the credit cards also come into the mainstream, and I guess the entire ecosystem can run on UPI, because it is taking care of both P2P pull push and P2M pull push.
You an entrepreneur, you've seen this whole standardization of technology. Very often as entrepreneurs, we play into what is it that we can do on a proprietary basis. Very often as entrepreneurs, we play into what we believe we can do on a proprietary basis, right? Very often that is technology. As you see the whole stack getting standardized, right? What is your thesis of where will entrepreneurs innovate? Where will they create the differentiation? Where is their value to be had? Assuming that India stack is functioning, well, 1 billion people on it, and hence payments and authentication, those cease to be problems.
Right. So the way I see UPI and everything that NPCI is doing, they are building the roads, right? So the government builds the roads. Entrepreneurs build smart cars. So that's what I see the role of entrepreneurs. So to take the example of Simple, UPI is a fantastic infrastructure to build on top of for any payments company in India, whether it's a wallet like PhonePe, or Paytm or Simple. From my perspective as the founder of Simple, my belief is that when a payment happens or when a transaction happens, there's essentially a debit entry and a credit entry that has to happen in two people's accounts. Why should 40% of the transactions fail just to make this debit and credit entry in India? Why should it cost close to 2% to just make this transaction? At that scale, microtransactions become extremely uneconomical for a bank because the cost of processing, there's a fixed cost to processing a transaction which is about 2 to 3 rupees depending on the bank and their infrastructure. Right? So these are all some of the inherent problems with the current stack, and the only reason is because this stack was built 60 years ago when the internet did not exist. It was built on top of mainframes, and that stack has gradually evolved, probably now at IBM server levels, right? But not at AWS yet. So I think what UPI is doing phenomenally well is connecting the fortresses, which are the banks, to the roads, which can move data instantaneously. Now, companies like ours can build on top of this infrastructure, and like, for example, what Simple is doing is we are aggregating transactions. So we think that for every small transaction that happens, it's not necessary to enter the fortress of a bank, make a debit or a credit entry and settle the transaction right then. If a player like us can enable trust, then we can take a call, issue credit as a means of facilitating that transaction instantly, and thereby lubricate the entire process. So by doing that, we also offer buyer protection. Like, credit has a utility, right? Credit has a utility from the consumer's perspective, in the sense there's buyer protection. The user does not have to pay for a product till, in most cases, till they actually receive it. So it kind of emulates the real world scenario where when you're buying at a local store, you're paying money and you're taking the goods. So it's like, if you think about the hostage handover situation, there is no need for a leap of faith. But when you're buying offline, or when I say offline, when you're buying remotely, somebody needs to take a leap of faith. Cash on delivery is a leap of faith on the side of the merchant. Online payment or even wallet is a leap of faith on the side of the customer. Now, the problem that I have as a consumer with a wallet is I'm being asked to put money into something, like prepay into something, and then prepay again for something else. I think that my bank account is my biggest wallet. All I need is a mechanism that plugs into the bank account, which I can trust, which has some buyer protection so that I'm insured against any issues that may arise, merchant related, fraud related.
Buyer protection is still a very different product, right? But let me imagine, a situation where UPI is seamless, single-click payment possible at close to zero marginal cost. Why do I want to use Simple then to pay for my ticket on Book My Show?
Right. See, again, I'll just flip that around and give you a scenario that I see on Simple, for instance. Right? So there are users who make certain transactions, and sometimes there's a problem with the transaction, meaning they've purchased something and they have an issue with it. Now, they try to reach out to the merchant, but they are not able to get a reply from them. Now, since Simple has to collect money from this user for that transaction, we are inherently more beholden to solve that user's problem. Right? So the user just writes to us. We make it super easy for them to reach out to us. We have a hotline with the merchant through which we can resolve these issues for the user.
So you become a customer service company.
No, but if you think about it, yes, we are. That's fundamentally who we are. That's what we are bringing to. Tell me one person in this room who loves their financial services provider, who loves their bank. But our customers love us. Why? Because we take them very seriously. For us, user experience is at the center of everything. So we are a customer services company. See, the one point that I would like to make in this context, America, where digital payments sort of got invented, got to the point where they are today over a period of 60 years. Right? They started with Visa, MasterCard, essentially was a 20-digit number which was given to an individual, which that person would carry on a piece of paper to a store, because when superstores came about in the US, the manager of the superstore did not know whether this person's check will be honored or not. Right? So Visa, MasterCard kind of stood in between and said, yes, I know this guy, his check will be honored, you can accept it, give him the goods. Now from there, the same stack is currently being used for smartphone transactions. Obviously, it's inefficient. Right? So we need to take a relook at it, and India is at the forefront of innovation. The UPI stack, there is nothing, it's unprecedented what's happening here. So as an entrepreneur, it's a perfect time for us to be operating in the financial technology space.
Chaitra, one more question for you. So, you obviously are playing into new data, right? What are you seeing, not just in context of Simple, but otherwise unlocking on that front, right? That creates opportunities for entrepreneurs, right? So what kind of data do you think will come upstream in the next 12 months that starts to get relevant for financial technology companies?
I mean, look, if anything at this point, there's a data overload. I think at the end of the day, we are a data science company. And for us, the biggest challenge is figuring out that 99.9% of the data that does not make sense and identifying that 0.1% that actually gives me the intelligence I'm looking for. Right? So it's an iterative process, to be honest with you. And just in this context, to answer one of the questions you were asking, Shrikant, earlier, I think the owner of the data is the individual. As a customer, I own my data. I should have the right to give my data from any service, for that matter, to anybody who can give me some goods or services in return, right? So with the consent architecture, that's the most beautiful things which is only happening in India, which has not happened in any other part of the world, not even in the US, right? So I think both as entrepreneurs and as customers, basically the customer becomes the king. Now, if I want a good or a service, I can release my data, purely my transaction data, nothing proprietary to the company, right? So I think that's the revolution that's happening here right now.
Great. Before we continue further, I just want to open this up for the audience in case there are questions at this point. Yarman.
That's a brilliant question. So we are a technology platform. We think one thing we can do better than banks is build nimble technology. And we think there is one thing banks and NBFCs can do much better than that, be efficient capital providers. So they take the risk, they have the customers. We are the technology platform that enables instantaneous decision making to help them service their customers better. So like I said earlier, my savings bank account is my biggest wallet. And I would like that to be plugged in to a platform through which a platform that makes my life easier when it comes to transactions. So we are working with the top banks in India. We would love to figure out a way to work with Yes Bank, where so Simple is essentially a replacement to Visa MasterCard. So the way we are working with banks are offering Simple to their customers to make transactions seamless.
So Raman, if I may just, I think it's more a replacement to American Express.
Absolutely.
So you be careful.
I am Vijay Agarwal. I have a question.
Yes,
I fully agree that data is private and an individual owns it. So why don't the government come up with a data locker kind of a concept where you can have different layers of data, like personal, medical, financial, and then you have different layers of authorization based on need-to-know basis?
So I'm going to just preempt that question. Shrikant did mention there's a digital locker initiative that is going on which does precisely this.
But that is for certificates and like whatever. Yeah.
Well, the idea is that the locker is the central idea.
Yeah.
What you use it for, the use case that I explained was about a government use case. But like you mentioned, it is obviously useful in the healthcare sector and the education sector and so on. So the combination of consent architecture with a digital locker solves exactly what you brought up.
Yeah, so we could have like one master data file with various subsets and we can give permissions to use.
Whether the government owns that locker or there are private companies owning the locker, like Chaitra said, if the roads have been built, then we can all play on top of that.
Okay. Thank you.
I think we have time for just one final question and then we'll have to wind proceedings down.
With the UPI coming in, should wallets go out, or how would they still exist?
You want an honest answer? I would love that they go away. But the point is that it can be a fine coexistence for all players. Payments is a very subjective term in this country, right? I mean, there will never be a one-size-fits-all. So that's why we have so many of it, right? You have a mobile payments, you have cards, you have MaxTry, PMV, Tap and Pay. We are talking of RFIDs. We are talking of sound wave-based payments. We are now talking of UPI, IMPS. You know, all these methods will exist. It's finally, so somewhere, you know, jokingly I often say that as bankers we have to build all capabilities. It's just like how you have a buffet that's kept in a restaurant, right? It's up to the customer what he likes and what he wants to pick and choose. So I will provide all capabilities. It's finally the customer, depending on his, you know, how fast he can consume some of these services. Some of them are too technical in nature. Maybe they will not be able to cope up with it. Some of them which are very easily adaptable, they may continue to use it for a longer time. And hence, all these payment solutions can coexist. My only thing is, most of these should be riding off an interoperable solution so that there is fungibility, there is, you know, cross transactions that are possible. If you come up with too many proprietary solutions, then that's an overkill. I mean, somewhere down the line, you will start feeling the heat, and the overheads of running such solution will, you know, catch up with you. So that's exactly, I mean, wallets, if they come and become part of the interoperable solutions, then yes, I mean, it's like the entire merchant and the issuing side is available.
I'm so sorry, but we really are out of time. You could engage with our panelists off stage, but a warm round of applause, please. It's great also to see some banking representation in the times of demonetization, so thank you for being here. Thank you, folks, again, and here's just a token of appreciation. Programming notes, as always, we've got an entrepreneurship conversation happening in Shah Jahan Hall. That's with Sridhar Pinnapureddy, who's the chairman and MD of Control S. So if anyone's interested in listening in on that chat, you'd have to head to the Shah Jahan Hall. I'm just going to wait for the stage to clear up before we make our next keynote. This one actually wasn't on schedule, but we have made place for it because it's an extremely interesting story that we'd like for you to listen to. It's going to be a short one, 15 minutes. There won't be any audience Q&A after that because we've only got about 15 minutes. But once the stage is clear, I will introduce and tell you a little bit about our next speaker. So the gentleman who's coming on now is Shrikant Bola, who's the founder and CEO of Bolant Industries. What he's done is established a company really to leverage employment opportunities to uneducated and unskilled disabled people of India, which is a large swath, as you know. This is interesting because Shrikant himself is visually impaired from birth. He knows the challenges faced by disabled individuals in India. He fought to become the first student in the country permitted to study science beyond grade 10, and he really is passionate about changing the perceptions that people have about the differently abled. He's also co-founded the Samanvay Center for Children with Multiple Disabilities and Challenges. He's received the ICLIF Award in 2016, as also Indian of the Year in the Business category from NDTV in 2015. And he's going to come and talk a little bit about his journey and why he's so inspired to do things for the differently abled. Shrikant, if we could have you on stage. We're ready whenever you are to hear from you, Shrikant. You can start now. Thank you.
Okay. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. And it's a real honor addressing distinguished gathering of entrepreneurs and change makers who would help shape our country and the globe at large. It was a humbling experience meeting each one of you over my short time here at TiE and learning a lot from you all. I want to talk about three things today. My personal journey to becoming an entrepreneur, how are we doing things very differently, and how can you be a part of our journey? I know most of you are part of this new economy, digital, technology and transformative industries. But on the other hand, I am working in an old-fashioned, boring industry. And to much surprise, it's manufacturing, as you all know. But if we don't transform manufacturing, we don't go anywhere in terms of job and wealth creation for our people. All of us can't be employed in high-tech, right? Someone has to make the food we eat, and someone has to make the plates we eat the food out of, and that's what partially we do, among a whole lot of other things. I want to share with you a glimpse of my journey as a young entrepreneur. You see, entrepreneurship is like a spiritual journey. Ultimately, it is a very lonely path. It is so lonely because most people do not understand why do we want to do things so differently, work so hard, take huge risks, and put ourselves through a grinder. In fact, even today, if you go and ask my father, what do you want Shrikant to do? He would happily smile and tell you, I want him to get a government job and get married to a pretty girl. You know how it is, right? Since most of you are entrepreneurs, the thought of working for someone else, let alone for the government, fills me with total revulsion. And that is why I became an entrepreneur. I am such a rebel that no one wouldn't employ me, even the TiE. I believe our personal experiences and hardships often shape our journey in life and in entrepreneurship. My parents are agriculture farmers, and even today they have a yearly income of about 50,000 rupees. And from a very young age, I was determined not to be a financial burden on them. Yet my family gave me utmost love and care, and I'm so grateful to them for it. But when I started a school at a village government school far away from my home, it was challenging to say the least. Transportation is the most biggest problem we among rural Indians, because we don't even have 1 rupee of discretionary income in our pockets. So I simply walked to school every day. As a 6-year-old, let me assure you, all my senses were keenly developed, simply walking on the village roads, surviving for 2 years without the privilege of eyesight. The other thing that probably would have shaped me more than anything else is what happened every day when I get to school. Nobody wanted to acknowledge my presence or play with me. So I sat in the last bench wallowing in my loneliness. Maybe, now that I think, Lord Buddha would have had this similar experience when he sat in Lumbini before he got enlightened. But as a 6-year-old kid, I didn't know about that. I just wanted to be like a regular kid and want to play with everybody. So it was after 2 lonely years, my father finally decided that I should go to Hyderabad and special school so that I could be kids of my own kind. That was when my liberation began. I began to see what was possible. At Hyderabad, I was access to top-class teachers, mentors, library, whatnot. Wow. Hyderabad is when I realized nothing is impossible. God can give you your starting circumstances, but we make our own destiny. The future is in our hands, with just enough randomness to make things interesting and less predictable. This is not to say Hyderabad was not a challenging place for an 8-year-old kid away from his parents for the first time. Of course it was, but the stakes were higher. For the first time in my life, I realized if I'm going to work hard, I might as well aim as high as possible. Think about it. A person breaking stones in a quarry from morning to evening is definitely working harder than any of us in this room, right? But her productivity is not still enough to bring herself out of poverty or let alone build something meaningful. This is why I think exposure at the right age to right things is the most important thing. But what you do with that exposure completely depends on our hard work and talent. But without our exposure, hard work and talent won't take you beyond breaking stones. Now, when I looked at in this way, I was one of the lucky ones. The setbacks I actually had in life enabled me to gain more exposure. Every time someone said no to me, I would climb over his head to go to the next level. This is the secret in life. The ground level is always filled with no sayers, but as you go higher, you see people who say yes, and because that's how they perceive the world. The definition of success is nothing but seeing yes wherever you look. When I looked at the small manufacturing sector in India, I saw a lot of problems. Let me tell you, cottage industry is a terrible idea. Cottage industry is nothing but subscale, substandard and low productive enterprise. But if we can't grow, we can't become efficient and innovate. Without efficiency and innovation, we fall further and further behind. We decided to employ uneducated and unskilled people with disabilities as the core of our workforce. Our innovation lies in the fact that we create world-class products using people who are at the margins of the society. When they join Boland, they thrive and the company thrives too. We started Boland to provide mainstream opportunities for the 80+ million people with disabilities in India, but other than that, we are purely a commercial enterprise. We are also a startup because we have been in business for about 3 years, just crossed 3 crores in revenue per month and growing at 20% a month. I can see the amusement. You heard it right. We are growing at 20% a month since our inception, hiring about 500 people in its 10 manufacturing plants across the country, specialized in flexible packaging and recycled organic disposable product segment in the country, with a diverse portfolio of products and services in the printing and other ancillary industries. See, I had a very simple insight that led me to paper product manufacturing. It was heavily fragmented and dominated by cottage level players. I simply thought if I could bring in my MIT level thinking to a cottage industry in India, we could make some magic. It was later when I met my first investor and a board member, Ravi Mantha, who has long association with TiE, had a different insight about this business from a finance perspective. When you look at it, the cost of capital for these cottage level players is close to 50% per annum. And his idea was, if we could bring in capital at 15% per annum, that would supercharge our growth. And that's what we did. Growth is a self-fulfilling prophecy if you convince world to give you cheap capital. We are fundamentally altering the dynamics of the packaging industry in the country, and historically this has been a business with low-end players, with low-end business with low-quality players, doing a cash business and following unviable economic models. But on the other side, we are bringing high-quality products at scale to the market, more importantly, doing it the clean way, meeting all our tax obligations in full. Our current Indian and global expansions will go one step further in utilizing 100% renewable power and recycling 100% of our plant waste into usable products. Our goal is to create products that people should be proud to use. See, if all we bought had the full cost of environmental impact and the carbon footprint embedded in it, do you think the plastic disposables be cheaper than their compostable alternatives? There are countries like Germany and Switzerland where the true cost to the environment is reflected in the price of these so-called disposable products. And there will come a time when India heads in that direction, and when India does, we at Boland will already be there in welcoming you all. See, the good news is things are very different now. If you are willing to brave the bureaucratic hassles, India is the land of opportunities, just like the United States. Look at it this other way. India will grow at 8% a year for the next 25 years. In other words, assuming all that growth is in the cities, our cities will grow at 15 to 20% in terms of GDP, which means you can just become rich in India by just showing up or starting any business, as long as you want to tackle the bureaucrats. If you're not willing to do so, you can invest in companies like us because we are already doing it. By the way, we do things very differently at Boland. When we started our company in 2013, and until my board gave me a raise a few months ago, my salary was about 8,000 rupees a month. That's about $120. in most of those months, I mean, I did not even draw my full salary because there was no cash in the bank. I really think one cannot create something new by sitting in the lap of luxury. In fact, research shows our brains are hardwired to produce our best efforts only when there is a hardship. Of course, we can create hardship for each one of us by setting up a higher goal. I faced so much hardship in my life, it has become an addiction for me actually. But I also think if your response to challenges is to say bring it on, I'm sure the world will help you succeed. And having said all this, you know what, we are still on day one of our growth and we have to walk miles together before we create a cleaner and fairer world for all of us to live in. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for that, Shrikant. You're getting a standing ovation. I think conversations like these are good opportunities for all of us to give ourselves a shake and thank God for the opportunities we have and those that we might get, no? Here's a quick note on what will be happening in another couple of the halls. In the Shah Jahan Hall, there's a conversation happening about the future funding scenario. In case anyone would like to listen in on that, I'll repeat that. It's about the future funding scenario, and there's people from Avendes, from SIDBI, and a couple of folks from TiE as well in case you want to listen in on that. But part of your entrepreneurial journey will be what you do with your brand and eventually what you build it into. So this conversation is really going to take a step back and be a bit more macro and large-scape in its focus. May I invite on stage to talk about that, on building products and building brands, B.V. Jagdish. He's managing partner at Kaj Ventures, and he will bring his gang on as well.
Good afternoon. Pleasure to be here. My name is B.V. Jagdish. I'm an entrepreneur and currently I'm focusing on investing in early stage startup companies with my own fund called the Kaj Ventures. I co-founded a company called Exodus Communications back in 1993, which was funded by early TiE founders like Kanwal Rekhi, who is here, who is also a great mentor to all of us. And we took the company public in 1998, and we pioneered the concept of internet data centers. At the time when the data centers concept did not even exist, we were one of the early pioneers of internet data centers, took the company public in 1998. And I joined another company that I had seed funded back in 1999 to become CEO of a company called NetScaler, which was the next generation of load balancing products. And that company, after going through lots of ups and downs, the company was acquired. We did extremely well, and the company got acquired by Citrix for about $325 million. And I was with Citrix for a bunch of years, and since then I've focused on basically mentoring and advising the next generation of the entrepreneurs and investing in early stage companies. So it's been a great journey, great ride, and as the previous speaker basically mentioned, which by the way was absolutely phenomenal, right? Fantastic presentation with all the challenges, how this man has taken some bold decisions and how he has focused on few areas that basically helps to grow his business. And that calls for saying no to many things. Because saying yes is actually very easy. Saying no is the hardest part. Because before you say no, you have to think, am I doing the right thing or not? Whether you are building a product, whether you are addressing a specific market, whether you are creating a tagline, which leads to certain branding in the future. So these are all some of the tough decisions that need to be made during the entire journey of building a company. And it's even more important during the early stages of building. So that's why we thought as India is going to emerge into the next phase of the growth, where we will start seeing a lot of product companies and a lot of consumer-centric companies, because there is a massive destination market within India itself. As many of the speakers were saying, the GDP is going to be several $1 trillion over the next several years, and that will naturally create India to be a destination market. So entrepreneurs need to make very critical decisions, as you heard from the previous speaker. So this is a very natural process. So that means you have to build the right kind of product that the market wants. And it's very hard to do this whole product market fit. And that's where the whole navigation of the idea that you started with and where it ends eventually is the biggest challenge. And then comes the issue of the branding, because when you build a great product, market doesn't know who you are. How do you build the branding? So these are some of the challenges that the companies will start facing as the next generation of entrepreneurs build the next set of companies. So we have amazing panel today with some incredible people who have gone through this journey multiple times. And let me take the pleasure of actually inviting first Anjan Srinivas. Anjan is VP of Products at Nutanix. He has just relocated from California to Bangalore. That's where he is. And he also has a tremendous magic touch. Every company that he has touched pretty much has gone public. So he was with Cisco long time ago. They did well. And then he joined VMware. That did well. Then he joined Aruba Networks. That did well. And then 4 years ago, he joined Nutanix. He looks pretty young, but he has actually tremendous experience in building very, very complex infrastructure products. So he joined Nutanix about 4 years ago. And that went public, those of you who have noticed, about 3-4 months ago. So glad to have you, Anjan. The next one is Rajkumar, Irudaya Raj. Rajkumar is the VP of Products for ScaleArc. ScaleArc is actually one of the very unique companies for all of us, because ScaleArc was actually born in India. And ScaleArc has been moved to the Silicon Valley about 4 years ago. And it's solving a very complex database-related acceleration issue. So this is a product that actually sits inline in the data. So the product has to be not only feature-rich, but it has to be extremely quality-sensitive. And Rajkumar has tremendous background in building products at Oracle and a couple other companies. So he joined ScaleArc about a year ago, exactly a year ago. And he's going to share with us the journey of building great products. Thank you for coming. Satya Prabhakar. Satya is the co-founder of Sulekha. All of you have heard of Sulekha, right? Sulekha is actually a very well-known brand name. We were using Sulekha in United States for many, many years, and it's a fantastic success. built from ground up. Almost 14, 15 years ago is when you started that in Austin. And now the entire company has moved to India. So he has also diversified from initial just ticket selling to the Indian kind of events into various other e-commerce activities and other things. So glad to have you, Satya. And then last but not least, Amit Shah. Amit Shah is the country manager for strategy for Yes Bank. And Yes Bank is a very well-known brand name in India. And we're very proud to have all of you, honored to have. And let's start with a few questions. And then perhaps maybe we can invite the audience also to ask. So why don't you share with us each of your journeys, right, of building great products. What does it take to build these great products? And how is the branding that is associated as you're building these great products? So let's hear each of your stories and share with the audience.
So Jagdish, I think it's a loaded question. Products and branding go hand in hand, and they cannot coexist without each other in a simple way that if your product does not really delight your end customer, the brand will never get created. You can spend all the marketing dollars, put the right colors. I'm wearing Nutanix colored socks for those of you who are able to see my socks colors. You can do all these things, but doesn't quite build a brand till the customer delight is immense. And that customer delight comes from solving some real issues that they have been struggling with. And without that, I think it doesn't come. So if you see most successful companies, Apple is a great example, Google is a great example, the companies I have worked with, every moment that you are fostering customer delight and every simple thing is how you kind of start your journey to building a great brand that lasts. The second and the third key aspects also involve people, because I think people reflect the brand. The kind of people you bring all the way from your founding members to the engineers who kind of feel the pride of building those things, all the way down to your sales executives. As I kind of talk about more the enterprise way of doing business, everybody needs to carry that brand forward. It's not something that stops at your website or your brochure and then ends there. So maybe I'll just kind of pause here and
So if I interpret what you're saying, you don't just build a product within the four wall thinking that you're building a great product. You constantly, you are in touch with the customer, you are interacting with the customer, trying to get feedback from the customers, and that's what you incorporate in eventually building the right product that has a fit with the customer or the market.
Exactly.
First of all, thank you, BV. I'm delighted to be at TiE in beautiful New Delhi. For those of you who don't know Skillark, let me take a few seconds and explain what Skillark does with the scenario. So I was getting ready to fly from SFO to India. I pulled up my browser app to book flight tickets. After choosing a couple of flights, right, the app slowed down. It didn't work, and it eventually stopped. I was a little frustrated. Immediately I switched to a different app, went about finding the flights that I need, booked the flights, but not just that, I also booked the hotels that I need to stay in Mumbai, Bangalore, Delhi, right? And then it occurred to me that an app not working for a consumer caused and influenced the behavior to take my business elsewhere, right? And so that's really what Skillark does. Skillark is in the business of making sure your apps are consumer grade, your apps never go down, always fast. So if you're looking up a stock quote on NASDAQ.com, you're probably using Skillark. If you're buying a laptop on Dell.com, you're probably using Skillark. So now let me talk about what brand means to me, right? To me, a brand is, when we talked about a product, and product provides a solution that addresses a pain, right? An enterprise or a consumer has a pain, has a need, and that need has been met by providing and delivering that product. A brand, in my mind, iconifies that solution, right? when I think of a brand icon, right? Think of you have a headache, you have a back pain. In India, what's the first thing that comes to your mind? Zandupam, right? You don't think of anything else. Or if you're in the US, you immediately think of Tylenol, right? And so a brand to me is that actually maps to the solution, the pain that the consumer or a customer has, and immediately that's the first thing they should be thinking about. So if your app goes down, that's the first thing that should come to your mind is a product, right, that actually solves that issue. That's what it means to me.
Thank you very much. So we, just to explain what Sulekha does, we started in India in the year 2007. And Sulekha is a two-sided marketplace for local services. On one hand, you have consumers who have three sets of problems. One is, I have a lot of things to get done. I don't have a lot of time. I don't know who to choose, right? And on this side, we have a whole bunch of service providers, service partners who have a different set of problems, which is, I can do more work. I don't have enough work to do. I don't have enough capital, and I don't know how to reach the lady who has all these problems on the consumer side. So it's a very inefficiently served market. It's about $200 billion of services are transacted in India every year. So Sulekha seeks to be the matchmaking platform, a digital platform for solving the pain on both sides. So coming to the product part, I see there are three classes of so-called consumer internet products that exist. One consumer internet product that exists in the simplest form is one weight management app called Happy Scale. I would recommend it very highly. So, and there it is, you use the app to log your weight, and you can set your goals, and it breaks it down into various 10 milestones. So it is just the interface that is the product of Happy Scale that you use, right? The second class of apps have to do with the app providing certain value back to you, such as content. For example, actually Savan is a music app. So they go and acquire the rights for music, and you go and search for the music, and you stream the music and listen to music. So then that service is providing you with music as a content. So the product now has two components. One is the interface. The other one is the library of music that they're able to license. So now there are two variables to the user happiness of the product. Even more complicated is what we do, which is you have a need. Say, suppose you're looking for an architect in South Bombay, and we ask you to specify your need based on certain attributes, and we match those attributes to find the right set of shortlisted architects in South Bombay and introduce those architects to you so that you can reduce your time. But then your satisfaction of using that architect is no longer in my control as a matchmaking platform, right? It depends on which architect you have agreed to deal with, how much that guy is charging you, how he provides the service. So now the product is just not the interface, not the algorithm, but also a third party that provides this one. So there is a lot of complexities to what we're calling product management. And especially in services where a lot of it is depending on somebody else, it becomes even harder. And trying to build a brand is less important in these cases, because a lot depends upon the ultimate customer delight. We all want customer delight. So it is a bit more complicated depending on what class of products that we choose. And as we go along, we can discuss some more.
Thanks. So being part of a full-service commercial bank, I think I'm the least glamorous person in this panel here, because banking...
You are very important.
Yeah. So, but having said that, I, as a bank, because we're only 12 years old and one of the only greenfield banks in the country, I really feel part of having been part of a startup for that matter, right? I mean, ever since the bank started, there were multiple objectives and many times there were trade-offs, right? Should we build the bank? Should we acquire new customers? Should we invest in new business segments? Should we build a brand, right? And the capital is always scarce, right? So what do you prioritize? And I'm sure a lot of startups who are either bootstrapping or have some form of funding are also going through the same kind of challenges, right? So having seen the bank evolve and grow at an average of 30-40% CAGR year on year, even in the 13th year, I think I could maybe at some stage during the conversation share some of these insights on how did we go about brand building as a subject, while also focusing on business. I think secondly, the half-life of any innovation in our industry is reducing every day, right? There is nothing that you can say that, look, I've innovated on a new product or an offering, and you wouldn't have somebody else do it within 6 months' time, right? So innovation as a differentiator is, kind of going away very quickly in the banking sector. So how do you continue to stay relevant to your customers? How do you show to him that, look, I am different as a bank and you should be banking with me, is something that we are working on, right? And in some areas we've been more successful than the other. Third, a very related point is that differentiators per se in banking are reducing, right? Banking is a very old industry. Payments, cash management, trade financing, corporate financing, so on and so forth, is something that everybody provides, right? So one of the differentiators always, obviously, can be the kind of people you have and the knowledge that you have. But how do you create brand out of a commoditized kind of a product offering is something which is also very interesting, and we have been engaging and working a lot on this part. And last but not the least, the fourth point is, how do you stay in touch with your customers, be it a B2B customer as a bank, or B2B2C, or B2C? How do you stay in touch with them so that you know and guess what his needs are before he starts spelling it out, right? Quite often you can't go to your customer with a market research survey form asking him to fill in what he needs, right? I think that's the worst way you could go about getting your client's needs. But how do you work with him? How do you stay in touch? How do you listen to him or her and build back your product and therefore your brand? I think is the fourth point that I would like to dwell upon at some stage.
So it comes back to the same point that all of you are talking about is don't ignore the customer as you're building, whether it's an enterprise company or a consumer company. Like figure out how to have a constant interaction with the customer. So let me throw the next question. Perhaps maybe the enterprise guys, both of you can answer, and I'm sure the same question would be applicable to the consumer as well. How much of a brand do you think is actually attributed to product quality versus product innovation?
I think there are three critical segments of product branding when it comes to enterprises specifically. Clearly, the first one that leads is the innovation and disruption you're bringing to the market. So that's very clear. People recognize that. It's easiest to recognize as well. The second is a little more nuanced. It is how do you marry that disruptive innovation with a great design. So when you marry that, there is another level of spark that happens. And third, things will go wrong. Every product has its flaws. There's no perfect product. There's no software without bugs. And when things go wrong, how do you react and take care of your customers? So the innovation piece, the product marrying the design and usability.
Things go wrong in the sense at the time of you have deployed the product at a customer site, and that's when things go wrong.
Correct. So once the sale has happened, the customer is bought in, he's using it, and things go wrong, right? And then how do you react, and does the customer still appreciate you after a pretty brutal call with, my application is down, what should I be doing? And does he still say, look, the guy on the other side of the phone knew what he was doing, and he stood there with me in my times of the problem area. So I think those are the three key main areas where you start to build brand. Now clearly the innovative piece is much easier because people kind of pull for that information. They pick up on it, the press will pick up, the bloggers will pick up. And also if your attitude is right, there will be a groundswell of people who will be your champions. And that's the real tipping point for a lot of people. Companies you'll have to get those early adopters or the really early adopters excited and make them your champions. And they are part of your brand. They are the ones who will actually bridge the gap of the early adopters to kind of the late adopters, and how do you kind of transition from there. Because almost everybody, you build a product, I can tell you that you will probably go find 10 customers. The first 10 customers probably are the easiest to find. But as you really start to become the 100 and the 1,000, that's when the true test of brand really starts, the true test of product really starts. And then this product eventually, as you know, I think a lot of my panelists were saying, companies, innovators, entrepreneurs can actually bring it to a 0.9 version of the product. But from 0.9 to 1.0 is where that customer interaction becomes extremely critical, right? Because as Amit pointed out correctly, you cannot go to a customer and saying, hey, what's your problem? What should I be building? That's not how iPhone was built, or neither any of the great products. But then they had an idea. They went 0.9. First Apple came out, they didn't even have cut paste. And now we kind of, keep doing cut paste of so many things. And people say it won't fly. But they knew they had an innovation that could take them to 0.9. And then from there on, they could build.
Raj, you were giving me some amazing examples this morning. Perhaps that would be very valuable.
Let me share my views. I think you bring up some really good points about balancing product innovation with product quality and how that ties to the brand, right? I come from large companies. I worked at Oracle, like you said. I worked at IBM. And then coming to a smaller company that originated in India and has put out roots in the US and thriving, but it's still a young company, right? And I looked at it when I came on board and I said, quality, product quality is table stakes. That cannot be something that you look at as a feature. From day zero, when you're set out to build a MVP, you want to be able to look at your product and quality has to be baked in. And so I came in, just speaking for myself as an example of what happened. We had product quality issues. One of the first things we did was we will no longer have to address that as a first-class problem, because you want to start out thinking about quality, not just features, as the thing that you want to deliver first. So that's one. And I believe product innovation is equally important, right? Because what happens is when you don't pay attention to innovation, you stay behind. And let me bring this point home a little bit, right? I grew up in Bangalore, right? So coming to India at this time, I was in Mumbai for a week. I went to Bangalore, and I'm in Delhi now. You guys remember Ambassador car, right? I didn't see a single one of them on the roads this time. Even 25 years ago, right? If you think of a car, you think about Ambassador. Was it of good quality? I think so. Would you buy any other car 25 years ago? You would go buy an Ambassador. It was built for the Indian roads, had the right suspension, had comfortable seats. People would just go out and buy an Ambassador. Every government vehicle was an Ambassador car, right? So it had product quality. Did it have brand? You betcha, right? That was the only brand. Who would even doubt Ambassador is the car? That was an iconic brand. Where is it today? Not a single one. And I reflect on that, right? And I think about it and I go, where is product innovation? When we opened up to a free market and all the rest of the world was innovating on cars, building great cars, what was Ambassador doing? Now, I don't know all the details at a very high level, and I'm reflecting on just the quality versus innovation versus brand, right? Now, if you take the example of the same thing in the US, as old as Ambassador was, you can think of Ford, you can think of General Motors cars, built cars, right? Did they fail?
Even Fiat.
Even Fiat.
Fiat was pretty popular in India as well.
Exactly. I mean, they have survived by re-injecting. Did they fail? Yes, they failed. We'll talk about that some more, right? But they learned, and they learned some hard lessons, and they're thriving today. And so I think it's a very key point that innovation is equally important but quality has to be table stakes in my mind.
You know, Charles Darwin says this, right, about importance of change. Basically, he says, it's not the species that are intelligent that survives. It's not the species that are strong that survive, but it's the species that can adapt to the change are the ones who are going to survive. So that's why it's very important. So it's not about just building one product or building a quality, but constantly I think you have to be evolving. What do you think from a Sulekha perspective?
Yeah, on the issue of...
on the issue of this whole product quality, product innovation, right? I mean, you know, you have evolved over the last several years.
Sure. So, in many cases, you know, for example, we talk about Apple a lot, and we talk about other, you know, products that ship. So, in those cases, you know,
keep it closer.
In those cases, there is a long lead time. You know, Apple releases one iPhone every 1 year, and certain software that you ship, you know, release every 6 months. But when you're running a web business, and especially when there are multiple components to that web business, then you are every week you have a release cycle of some sorts, right? So it becomes somewhat hard to ensure the kind of quality for the software, for all the features that are rolling out across. You know, in our side we have user dashboards and user front-end tools, and then the service partner dashboard. There are at least about 18 different products that we are managing at any point in time, and every week we are releasing something. So it's very hard for us to ensure certain quality at all times. So on the web also, you know, for example, Gmail has been in alpha beta for such a long time. So there is also an expectation on part of the users that the quality will not be as you know, top-notch all the time. Yeah, but we need to do that. So the thing that we learned is that, you know, there are 3 degrees of freedom. One is, you know, the scope of the features, then the quality of the product, and then the deadline by which you're going to launch. So the learned wisdom over time, over the ages, has said that flex on scope, right? No, don't flex on time, deadline. Don't flex on quality, but flex on scope, right? If you want to give up something, give up on scope, but don't compromise on deadlines. Don't compromise on quality. So if you look at you know, the simple app which runs India pretty much, you know, which is WhatsApp, right? I'm sure, you know, when they looked at it, they only sought to solve 4 problems. One is to remove the cost of text messaging, make it free. Second one is the problem that they found is that I want to know when the other person has read the message or not. When you send an SMS, you don't know. In WhatsApp, you can tell. The third one is I want to be able to communicate with a set of people, which is the ability to create a group. And the fourth one is I want to be able to send an image. So they solved only those 4 things, right? And as a minimum viable product, I think that they did a good job. I mean, they didn't care about italicizing, making it bold text, and putting all sorts of other things. So I think to know what is the minimum viable product and ensuring the quality of it and launching it with deadline is, in our experience, the most important thing, and also the hardest.
I want to add on to what Anjan was mentioning earlier, which is, you know, bring something up to 0.9 and then take it to 1 after talking to a customer. And also the notion that when you develop product, you are adding features. Is something that you mentioned, right? Maybe you have to restrict the features. But I want to give an example where we innovated on a bottom of the pyramid product by actually stripping off features to the bare minimum, right? Because every time you talk of financial inclusion, for example, what do you think of is Jan Dhan accounts these days, right? Or you also think of giving micro loans, right? So when we went out and when we spoke to you know, migrants, urban migrants, you look out of Bombay, look out of Delhi, any building, you see a lot of migrants, right? They're daily wage laborers. These guys by definition are living in shanties without address proof, KYC, so on and so forth. For the longest period of time, it was impossible to bank with them, right? And financial inclusion also takes you back to villages, while 50% of Mumbai and Delhi and many other metros are financially excluded. So we said if we want to bank this segment, which is completely in a way, quote unquote, blue ocean. What do we do? So when we spoke to them, we realized that, look, he does not want a bank account, right? Government, the regulator can push because it's important in the long term, but this bloke doesn't want it. He clearly doesn't want a loan because he is earning daily wage, right? By definition, his cash flow is more or less positive. Third, he does not understand insurance, right? Maybe he has heard of it. Mutual fund is never heard of, right? So what is it that he wants to do? He earns 500 to 800 rupees a week, spends half of it on his food, balance he wants to send back home. And home is in the rural hinterland or up north, wherever, right? Wherever he's come from. He has a bank account in that place, right? His family or somebody in the village has a bank account, a post office, whatever, right? He has a KYC'd account. So if all that he wants to do is to remit money back home, can I give him a remittance product, right? And this I am talking of 2011-12, when most of the remittance products were not there, right? So IMPS had, I think, just about come in. So we created the first Yes Money domestic remittance platform, and in our opinion has kind of was a precursor to a whole lot of other movement that has taken place. And as of today, I think 15 to 20,000 crore worth of micro remittances have gone through this platform, where we made the mom and pop store as our sub BC agent, right? And around 45 lakh unique customers are transacting. We did a social audit of this product, and we saw that 60 to 70% of the remittance is happening before the banking hour or after the banking hour. So he's effectively saving his daily wage, because if he goes to a PSU or bank or a money order or whatever, he needs to spend those couple of hours standing in a queue, right? So here he just goes to the mom and pop store, gives the money, gets remitted, and he has a mobile phone, he gets an instant SMS. So this, I think, is a way to address a completely blue ocean market, very big market, make money. We are actually making money on this product, very good money, right? And getting a lot of awards also at innovation conclaves and so on and so forth. But it is tilting the product development cycle on its head, where you strip things away to the bare minimum.
So let me ask the two of you, coming from the consumer market, perhaps maybe you guys can throw your views on this. So this whole user experience, it's such a big thing today, right? People did not really care much about it 15, 20 years ago, but this whole user interface, user experience is such a important thing. I'm just curious to understand from both of you, how do you make the investment decisions, right, in developing the user experience versus the core back-end functionalities? Because at the end of the day, there is only so much that you can do as an investment, right? So how do you prioritize? And even from an investment perspective, right, where is the weightage? Whether more on the user experience side or more on the back-end side? I think it would be very curious for many of us to know.
So, a couple of years ago when we went through this little brainstorming, right, on what do we want to do and how do we put design thinking into the way we look at some of these things, we came up with a simple thumb rule of 6:3:1, right? Which is 6% or 60 out of my 100 rupees will go towards new customer acquisition at any point of time, because we are a growing organization and we need to grow fast and so on and so forth. 30% will go towards servicing our existing customers, right? And user experience, improvements, upgrades, so on and so forth can all fall into that. The last 10% are going to go for moonshots, right? Things that may not happen in the short term. These are big bets you want to take, you want to play around, so on and so forth. Don't expect ROI on this last 10%. This is, I think, a thumb rule that we have created. Any new proposal, any new thought process has to flow through these, right? So either it should create significantly new customer segment for me. I'm not talking of 20% increase in customer base, which is business as usual, but it has to create a new segment, or it has to drastically change the way I service my customer, right? So minor improvements, reducing the call center time from whatever to 0.9 whatever, doesn't matter unless I can create a new service channel, right? And the third has to be innovation. It has to create a new business line for me a couple of years later. So this is our 6:3:1 kind of a thumb rule at the bank.
Yeah. If you were to ask us the question which is more important, the front end or the back end, we would say yes. They both are equally important, and one of the things that I find here in, I think especially in India, I think a lot of companies face tremendous difficulty. We don't have any difficulty at all in hiring technology people. I think we get top skill. But we find it very hard to find good actually product management people. We find it even harder to find good UX design skills, user experience design skills. And I think a lot of UX people that go as UX guys think that Photoshop is the beginning and the end of UX, right? So if you ask a question to any user interface designer, you know, what books on human psychology have you read in the last 5 years? His response would be, why are you even asking me that question, right? So I think there is not enough appreciation for the human psychology aspect of this one, right? I think what you mentioned is that to remove features away from the product is just as important part of a design as adding things, because we severely overestimate, I think, the cognitive capacity of human beings to deal with complexity, right? So I think our eagerness is, okay, the more the better. It just, we keep on adding things to the point where...
Features,
yeah. I think to make things simpler is even harder than...
So now that, you know, most of India is also exposed to user interfaces from Amazon or some of these multinational corporations as well. And of course, some of the Indian companies like Flipkart and others. Isn't user experience also becoming equally important? Even in India?
It is, absolutely.
It is.
Absolutely.
The whole navigation from...
But the front end is not the only thing, right, that the user is exposed to. Take the case of Amazon. Of course, the interface is important in ordering. But then there is about 70% of the user experience is in actually receiving the right product on time.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So the emotional response of a user to someone like an Amazon depends not just on the front end, but until you get the box and you unbox it and you see it, right? So that way it's a lot more complicated.
So let's touch bases on the culture aspect of the company. So we have seen many successful companies, right? If you take Apple as an example, Apple is more a tops-down kind of an approach versus a Google is more like a bottoms-up kind of an approach, right? Which is more collaborative. Innovation comes from engineering teams, and then it gets filtered up, and products come out, right? Multitude of products actually come out, and there will be lots of failures as well. But someone like an Apple, it's very clear right from the top. This is the product I'm going to work on. I'm going to make this thing successful, right? And if we fail, let's fail as a whole thing, right? I mean, it's not like all of Apple products have been successful. So I'm curious to understand from your perspective. You guys have seen many, many, many companies that you have worked with. Many of them successful, many of them not successful, and products successful, not successful. What's your preference of the type of culture? Especially there are so many entrepreneurs here, right? Because I believe that culture is something that needs to be set from the top, right? Whatever culture you're going to adapt, right? So the culture, whether it's a bottoms-up innovation culture or it's a tops-down kind of a culture, but ultimately the culture actually is set by the leadership, right? And that gets followed by the rest of the company. So you want to?
Yeah, I think again a very broad topic, Jagdish, on culture itself. And I think, but one thing culture does is brings the ability for people to accept failures. And I think if, as you rightly said, culture starts from the top. Clearly there is no substitute for that. An entry-level employee in the company cannot come and change the way of life or how people perceive things. Clearly, the leader, the innovator, the entrepreneur, the founder will actually set the tone for how things are actually done in the company. And are we really honest about listening to ourselves? Do we really value feedback? I'll give you one example about kind of the open culture that kind of I observed in Nutanix, which is very unique. So I was the first product manager, went in there. I came up with a product pricing for a certain new set of products that I put out. And that had to be published on this forum that's called Yammer. I don't know how many of you have heard of Yammer. It's like Facebook for the enterprises. And I was open to questioning from the 80 different salespeople that were out in the field, and they had to almost like, harass me on Yammer before we all agreed, yes, this was the pricing we are going to go off. Most companies will never do that. It's a simple example. They will just say, there was a pricing committee meeting, this was set, you go and sell. That is the culture. But imagine when you open this up, clearly people sitting in the ivory castle don't know everything in the front lines. So the empathy for front lines becomes part of your culture. Then, if you have made a mistake, if you have had a scope for innovating further on that pricing model, you have had a culture that adopts those things and accepts those failures as well. So simple things like that really start to shape the company's behavior, because now each sales rep thinks he's the owner of the business. He's running a franchise. Each sales rep thinks, look, New York is my franchise. I can go back to the product guy, question him on any bullshit. I can tell my feedback and then come up with a real meaningful solution for the customer. That's one part of the culture. Again, culture has many definitions to many people, but I believe end of the day, I think how people behave in the most adverse situations truly define what the culture they stand for, what the value system they stand for. And again, it comes from the top. There's no substitute for that.
I'll share my thoughts. Maybe since you brought up culture, let me see if I can pull up one slide that I had.
You have that slide. Who's operating the slide? Can you just, yeah. Just hit the space button. Perhaps maybe it will go to the next slide. It's already loaded.
Yeah, it's already loaded.
So why don't you?
The slide should have my name on it, or AJ. But while they're bringing it up, let me talk about this, right? I think it's very interesting models, right? You brought up Apple.
I know you are very passionate about it.
Well, let me give you my thoughts, right? I think, Apple, it's very top-down. And by the way, I think the top-down versus bottom-up both have their merits and demerits, right? In a top-down, picking, again, Apple, you brought up that example, the product market fit has been identified. You have nailed down exactly what the end product should look like. And there is a desire to strive to provide an end-to-end product, right? And so that instills a type of culture, if you will, right? Because it's a driven, top-down culture. And the downside is the stakes are high, because in that model, where everything has been figured out and has to be delivered, it has to work, right? Whereas in a bottoms-up type of culture, right, where you picked on Google as an example, you clearly have to start with the minimum viable. And, Amit, you've been talking about minimum viable product, strip down as much as possible. So you want to start with something very small and simple and make sure it has to work. In Google's case, that was search. And it has to work really, really well. Otherwise, they weren't going to compete with the 5 or 10 other search engines out there. And that brings a different type of, challenge and a different type of culture to the table. So I use this slide that you guys are seeing on the wall there. It's an interesting thing. I come from big companies. I'm now at a startup. Somebody, as we was mentioning, I was finishing up a year. Somebody, one of the employees walked up to my office and said, Raj, so you've been here for a year. What do you think about our company? It's a startup, right? And we all know how challenging that is. What's your view? I thought that was a great question. So I had him sit down and kind of drew this model, a framework, if you will, right, to think about it. And I put this in these 3 different buckets. And it's really, you want to apply this to your own companies as you're starting up and growing and building your product and, trying to make sure that your company is successful. On the left-hand side, if you can actually build out that slide, that would be great. Go and make sure you
hit the next slide. Hello? Can you hit the next slide? No?
I know, but it's an animation. So if you just press next, it will bring up the next one. It is only one slide, but it's animated. So let me speak about culture, and I'll keep talking while they do this. Culture is front and center, right? And you want to think about culture in 3 concentric rings, the way I think of it. Sorry, the other way around. There you go. Right? And I put them in concentric circles because they are related to each other. And you see honesty, right? And you see courage. And when I reflect on those things, you really want to be thinking about the people, right? Are they honest when they are working on their code, when they're developing the product? Are they courageous enough to accept failures and not hide it? Oftentimes the problem is you do something and you're afraid to tell anyone about it. And those are the type of things that adds up as what's called tech debt, right? And you really don't want that. And you want to prevent that as early and as quickly as possible, right? Innovation is super important. We talked about innovation. You want to be able to think about building disruptive products. You want to be able to think about building technologically superior products, right? For which you need to be paying attention to the market, right? You talked about several stacks in your product, for example, especially when you have many different products that you're delivering to your customers. And last but not the least, the market aspect of it, where you want to be thinking about making it profitable. Whatever you deliver, it's not so much about delivering 100 things, but it is about being able to deliver one thing and thinking about how to actually make money out of it, right? And so bringing it full circle, the way I thought about it is, all of these are very important, but at the top of my mind is really culture. And that becomes front and center when you think about the people. You said it's very easy to find, talented people, technically skilled people, but what is really important is to bring that right character to the table. And if they are part of your team, they'll do pretty amazing things.
Very good, very good. By the way, if people have any questions, please raise your hands.
You were talking about the people and the culture. Some of the challenges that I have faced is we have technical architect who's very good. He's really visionary. He has a lot of good ideas, but it's very hard about his own ideas rather than taking ideas of the team members. And we have difficulty trying to steer him sometimes to do some more urgent things that are pressing and required for like client demonstration. So if you could share some thoughts, because you guys are a lot more and a lot successful, how you would try to deal with this issue, He's a good man, he's a good person.
Yes.
Well, of course he was in charge, right? He decided the vision, everything. We have a small company in Columbus, Ohio. This guy is an American guy. He's been with us 13, 14 years. But he's chief architect. So we have difficulty steering him.
Completely understood. I think it's a great question. And, one of the differences between having a really skilled senior technical architect, or even a CTO for that matter, right, who understands the product technically really well and knows how to build it. And I worked with quite a lot of them in the past and continue to work with them. The difference between that and product management aspect of it is one of the things that surfaces very high in my mind is how can you be empathetic? And the aspect of being empathetic is I'm technical, I know everything, but he doesn't know, he doesn't know. That doesn't mean they're not smart, right? That doesn't mean they don't know what they're doing. How can I be humble enough? How can I show empathy to first understand where they're coming from? Oftentimes communication is an issue, and when you get into the habit of, listening and your ability to really understand what's going on, you actually respond well. So that's one very important thing. Be empathetic. The other aspect of it is not just with the technical team, even if it's, say, for example, you're talking to your sales team, right? Just because you know what the product does, how it works, doesn't necessarily mean your sales team knows how to sell it, how to make money out of it. And it is super important that they understand how to make money out of it. And if they don't know how to talk about the key elements and highlights of the product, how are they going to sell it? And so it again brings back that how can you be empathetic? And this is one of the critical roles of product management, right? To be able to straddle and bridge the schism between, the technical depths to the actual business value, and making sure that that information flows both ways, from the customer and the requirements back into the product, and the product back into the field. And that's really I want to say, the mantra to success.
Please come forward. Yes.
Thank you. What we are discussing is, is exponentially great. For a person who has spent a couple of months or years in starting up, these are things that requires, we understand the concept behind it, building culture and building innovation. But on ground, when you get down to it, when you put your blood and sweat into it, then it requires things beyond your understanding of it. You understand the concept, that what will it yield to, which we agree with. But when you get down to it, it takes a lot of discipline, a lot of patience to strive through that process of hardship, where when you understand it, your team doesn't understand, has that vision or has that understanding of the concepts that we are discussing. Neither does it your customer, neither does your government, neither does your community, neither does your co-working space. So you are left alone with that, with giant beliefs, and you have to strive through the whole process. And that is the critical part where a lot of people give in. We can understand the point of view. We can agree on that, but to put it to action, to get things done, to make an impact, we need more than understanding. So could you throw some light on that? Yes.
So I think if I understood your question correctly, you said the founder has a vision, has a dream, but how do you kind of take your team along such that even in the time of adversity, they're making progress and making impact? And I think it comes down to actually December 17th, 1903, actually was the first time the Wright brothers flew the plane. I don't know if you guys know. It's today, 1903, Wright brothers flew the plane. They, actually, if you look at it from a startup perspective, there were many people trying to do and build a plane at that time. It was the most fashionable thing. I think as you now go and talk about IoT, everybody is doing an IoT company. Building planes was the fad at that point of time. And then there was a couple of groups had great funding, had very smart people, and they were all kind of, government was behind them to kind of go succeed. They did not succeed, but Wright brothers did. What makes Wright brothers, who were owners of bicycle shops in Ohio, to kind of succeed making a flight when the funded companies which had millions of dollars did not succeed. It comes down to what you believe in and what you're inspired by. And those are the fundamental tenets. And if you as a leader, first of all, have to be inspired and believe in it, persevere through all the problems. I think there's been a lot of sessions that have talked about. An additional important part for your team is to be able to pass that inspiration on. Because if they don't believe in why you're out there, then you will never kind of make an impact. So they'll have to believe that what you're set out to do. Most people don't believe in leaders because they have to, because they want to, right? And that's the key ingredient in my mind for you to actually make a big dent to take your team along in the times of adversity.
I think I'll have to add one bit here. It is not always necessary to convince everybody of your dream, right? There will always be some naysayers and, doubting Thomases. So what you need to do, like we say in Hindi, Sam Dand Danda Bhed, right? किसी को समझाओ, किसी को डांटो, किसी को जो भी करना, Sam Dand Danda Bhed, right? So each of these are different strokes for different folks. Sometimes you don't give two bits to whether somebody understands your dream or not. How does it matter? You just need a transactional relationship there, right? But yes, of course, your core team over a period of time needs to believe in it, needs to see the same dream as you are. A lot of times the people that you start off with may not be the core team, right? But they are there for that moment. And new people may come in at a later stage of life in your team, right? And they may be your core team because they understand the vision as well as you do. So you'll have to drop some people as you go along. It's a bad thing to do. But if there is no alignment of vision and strategy, maybe it only does execution, right? So you need to figure that out.
Okay, gentlemen, I'm afraid we're out of time and we're running behind schedule, so we'll have to wind it up here. But a warm round of applause, please, for the conversation. I think lots of thoughts generated, especially in terms of brand communication and brand building. Thank you very much for that.
The panelists will be around if you guys have any questions.
Okay, so through the course of the last 48 hours, I think we've tried to give you pretty much everything in terms of the flavor there is of the entrepreneurial spirit. Here's something a little bit different as well. I think who you possibly will hear from next could be the youngest entrepreneur in the building right now, Divyank Turakhia, who's founder and CEO of Media.net. You might know him off the internet and from news as also one of the youngest Indian billionaires. He sold his company to a Chinese consortium, I think, for close to $1 billion, along with his brother, and he is ranked in the Forbes richest list as well. I think he's somewhere at 95, if I'm not mistaken. So here he is, the youngest entrepreneur, sharing, I suppose, his story and how he got it right. Divyank will be chatting, of course, with Venk Shukla of TiE. So Venk Shukla, Chairman of TiE Global, will be leading that conversation, and as promised and as I already introduced, here's Divyank Turakhia. Perhaps in the Q&A you can ask him what exactly he did right to make that billion-dollar deal for himself. Hi.
So before we get started, this is the last keynote, and after that, the conference should be over. So before we end this, I just want to acknowledge the contribution of a lot of volunteers and TiE Delhi staff who helped put it together. So I'll ask people who are part of the organizing committee to please stand up. Those who are here, Saurabh, please stand up. Who else is? Anyone part of the organizing committee is here? Okay, they're not here. And the steering committee, people of steering committee and TiE Delhi staff, they worked really, really hard, led by Geetika, and made it all happen. So please give them a round of applause. Geetika is there. Thank you, Geetika, for all your outstanding effort and putting this thing together. Thank you very much. Please give her a round of applause. All right. Okay. So, it's yours. Sure.
Is this working? Yes.
So I'm here with Divyank, and we'll start with a capsule summary of Divyank. He is 34-year-old. He has had 7 companies. Each one of them had a profitable exit, and every company that he has had has doubled in revenue and employees every year. This is not a usual run-of-the-mill entrepreneur that you're going to see. When I was reading it and I was talking to him, it was quite revealing that someone could build 7 companies before the age of 34 and have successful exits in every single one of them. So this conversation would be to understand who Divyank is and how does he manage to do these things. So you started your first company at the age of 14.
Well, that was more freelance consulting and great pocket money. But if you consider that, sure. I started at I started at 14. So it's been a long time.
And
so it was 96, I think.
It was 96. And you did that because you wanted to play a video game and all those kind of things.
Yeah. So growing up, I started programming when I was young. Like many people in this generation, I started programming when I was 8 or 9, and the backstory to that was just like every other 8-year-old, I used to love playing my video games, and my dad came to both me and my brother and said, "Hey, do you guys want to get better at this?" We're like, "Sure." And he's not tech, and we grew up in a standard Indian middle-class family.
What did he do, by the way?
Well, he's a CA.
A chartered accountant.
A chartered accountant. He runs a small practice, and it's still going, and he still does it, and he still loves it. But anyways, he came to us, and he's like, "Do you want to get better at it?" And we're like, "Sure." And he's like, "Well, if you could program, then you could reverse engineer these games and get better at it." And I'm like, "That sounds like fun." So that got me into programming. And then in the pre-internet days, this is before 95, I ran a small bulletin board system to play multiplayer video games with my friends on what was then a 2400 baud modem. So slow, ASCII, but still fun.
And that got you into some consulting business with NASCOM.
So when the internet came into India, because of that, I kind of knew everything around networking, around what the internet was, and one thing led to another, because of which we started freelance consulting for large corporates in India.
Including
pocket money.
Including NASCOM.
Including NASCOM. In fact, NASCOM was one of our first clients. Not only were they one of my first consulting clients, they were also one of my first hosting clients when I started a hosting company when I was 16, and co-founded that with my brother. And they were amongst the first 40 clients we signed up. And it's a funny story, and that's how we got into consulting. NASCOM had their first Cyber City conference. In a day before the conference was supposed to be, and this was the first internet conference, stuff wasn't working, and someone somewhere told them that, hey, there's these bunch of kids we know, you should call them. At that point of time, I think they would do anything to basically make things work, because this was into the night. And we did, we came, we fixed stuff, and from that point, anybody asked, some of those folks at Masscom as to, we have this tech problem, or we have this internet problem, they would be like, oh, there's the kids we know. And it was awesome for us, because it wasn't for the money. At that point, the idea was, the equipment was really expensive, so if anybody would let me touch the equipment, I would have done it for free. They paid me to do it. So from their perspective, they were getting stuff done. From my perspective, they seemed to be paying me a lot, because as a 14, 15-year-old, it was incredible. From their perspective, it was nothing. So it was a perfect match. It worked out. And then realized that the problem with consulting was you can only manage X number of projects at a time as an individual. And they could be large projects, but you can only manage X number of them from a time spent standpoint. So decided to run a products company. And this was 98. And while I was doing consulting, my brother tried to run the monster.com of that time with 50,000 internet users. And that obviously didn't make sense. We didn't have the numbers right. So in 98, we decided we'll start a products company. The only two things that made sense from a product standpoint in India was one was run an ISP, because everybody needs to be connected online. Or the second one that we came up with was everybody will want to be online and set up a website online. We were already building websites as part of consulting, but that required you to talk to every client and spend time with them and figure out that you need to change the color of the site now to pink or green or blue, which is a lot of fun because their personal color preferences are the highest priority of the day for you. But it meant that we had to spend a lot of time, just doing that from a consulting standpoint. So decided to run a hosting company where the idea was whether we have, 100 customers or 1,000 customers or 10,000 customers or 1 million customers, our processes wouldn't change. So I started a hosting company because the ISP thing made more sense to us, but we didn't have money to start an ISP. For hosting, we could borrow, a small amount of money. We borrowed about 25,000 rupees from our parents back then to lease our first server for month one. The consulting clients became hosting clients. We had enough money to pay for the next few months, pay back that initial money, and then kept scaling and adding people and kept reinventing ourselves. That business was eventually, it became multiple businesses by itself because we were in hosting, we were in domain registration, we were a domain registrar. We had this thing called logic boxes, which used to provide the backend for other domain registrars. So it became a bunch of businesses in which we exited to the Endurance Group for about 160 million.
How old were you then?
This was recent. We exited it recently. It was running for a long time. I started in 98. I built a management team around it. I stopped running it in 2005 because there was a great management team that we had put into place. It kept growing. From a growth standpoint, by the time that I was 18 in the first 2 years, it allowed me to have a net worth of over $1 million and over $1 million. And by the time I was 21, I had 100,000 plus customers globally. This wasn't a first mover thing.
So tell me, Bombay has millions of kids like you.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
What was different about you?
Firstly, I think there are many, many, many people, not just in Bombay, but all of India, that can do incredible things. I think many people can replicate what I did. There's a couple of differentiators. I think that one, I think people don't fully understand that they can, so they don't know their potential. I think that is the first problem. They give up sometimes when they fail, and it's okay to fail. There isn't a single person that is successful that hasn't failed continuously until at some point in time they become successful. They lose focus because these things take time. There are no shortcuts. People look for shortcuts, and there's nothing wrong with that. As human beings, we like shortcuts. But I don't know any successful entrepreneur, and I've read about many, many, many successful entrepreneurs, and I know several of them now personally, that having spent insane number of hours doing what they do before they got to where they got to. Because most entrepreneurs that you feel are overnight successes, when you actually look at the backstory, it takes a decade to become an overnight success at the minimum, and sometimes longer, right? So to get to this point, I started really young. And I would really advise everybody, start as early as possible. And if you haven't started early, the right time to start is now, because there's no better time. And then keep at it, stay focused. And as long as you stay focused, you'll build that specialty, or you'll build that knowledge over time. And obviously, it's not just the number of hours of doing the same thing. It's the number of hours in which not only are you doing the same thing from an industry standpoint, but hopefully you're spending those hours learning and evolving and continuously trying different things so that you can understand how to make the right set of changes to whatever it is that you're doing to become more efficient. And in today's world, it's a lot easier to build large-scale businesses than they used to be 20 years ago. I mean, because when we started, if you wanted to build a large portal, you needed to know everything about server optimization. Now you have, cloud services that do that for you. You needed to know everything about security. Now you have services that do that for you. You needed to know everything about how to manage millions of users. Now you have platforms that can plug and play and do that for you. So there is no better time than now in terms of being able to start from scratch and build something that is far more scalable, a lot easier. But it also means that there are lots of competition that can do that. So you have to keep that in mind and then figure out how to identify your core strengths, double down on your core strengths, identify on your weaknesses. And in my case, I didn't work on the weaknesses. I just ignored them. And I'm like, these are my strengths. My strengths are, I'm really good at tech. I suck at sales. I'm really good at operational efficiency. I'm very good with capital allocation. Let me focus on those things that I'm really good at. Let me ignore initially what I'm not great at, and then bring in other people that are really good at that, and let them handle that part of it. Because when you're not good at something and it's a weakness, it's not fun doing it. That basically means you're not going to end up spending thousands of hours doing it. And if you're not going to end up spending that time doing it, you're never going to be the best. And you really need to be extremely good, if not the best, to be successful.
So while doing all these things, did you have time for college?
Well, I did. I don't know how many people in this crowd know what BCom is, but I did something called BCom. As long as
we all know.
As long as you appear for the exams, you don't really need to attend. You'll get a distinction. So, I would have dropped out. I would have dropped out when I was 14 or 15. I grew up in an Indian family with an Indian mom who's Gujarati. That's hard. So she came to me and she's all melodramatic and emotional. And she's like, no, you have to do this for me. I don't care what you do. You have to get a degree. I can't have a kid that didn't have a degree. It's like the worst thing for that. Who will ever marry you? Right? I'm sure she was thinking that. But so she said that, look, I don't care what you do as long as you get a degree. And I'm like, I'll get one as long as you don't care which one. And I got BCom, which was,
And you never showed up for college?
For a couple of days every year. And I didn't really go to college. As in, I went and I didn't go. I'm sure a lot of people have done that in BCom.
I'm glad there are no kids in this hall.
But I was working all throughout, right? It wasn't that I was, going out and having fun, which I think kids should totally do that. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. You have one life. You want to be happy all throughout. And if that's what brings you happiness, then that's what you do. But what brought me happiness was working on tech stuff and solving complex tech problems. And I like building businesses. So I found what I loved doing when I was really young. I did it for the last 20 years. I am here where I am because of that. And I'll continue doing it for a long time.
Along the way, there must have been a lot of uncles and aunts and all these other ones who must have given you advice.
So so there are a lot of people that really care about you and have the best, they have your best interests at heart, but they don't necessarily have the best advice.
Okay.
Right? Yeah, and you get a lot of free advice, especially, I'm sure everyone in every culture gets free advice, but, if you are a Gujarati kid with who wants to basically drop out, you get a lot of free advice. So I got a lot of that. I chose to understand where they're coming from, but it doesn't necessarily apply to where you want to be and where you're coming from. And I felt that there are thousands of people that you can learn from, which is why, whenever someone asks me as to who inspires you or, who's your role model, I prefer not having one, and I think anyone that has one is limiting themselves. There are thousands of people, both in the past and the present, across every nationality, race, and color, that have done absolutely incredible things. You can learn from all of them by reading about them and understand where they failed and where they succeeded, and figure out the mix that works for you, and that's the mix that you should apply for yourself. So the biggest one, in terms of bad advices, I'll tell you a few ones that I got that were terrible. I would say, and a lot of people get them. One of the biggest one is, there are too many companies that are already doing this. Why are you getting into this space? But if there are too many companies that are doing this, it's because there's money in the space, right? So that's, you have to understand that. I understand where they're coming from. They're like, okay, there's competition. That's what they're trying to tell you. But, so you try and get that part of it, that, okay, there will be competition, but that's a good thing. That's not a bad thing. In fact, if I look at all the businesses I've run, and let me break those down for you. I ran a hosting company. I wasn't the first hosting company in the world. I wasn't even the first one in India. I was like number 7, 8, 9 or something like that. And I built that to become one of the largest hosting companies out there. I wasn't the first domain registrar. I was the 179th domain registration company in the world. When I sold the business, my brother and I did that together. When we sold the business, it was number 5
in the world.
When I did my first domain advertising business, I was the last domain advertising company out there globally. It's now the largest globally. When I did my contextual advertising business, I was the last contextual advertising company globally. Now we're the second largest in that space. And when I did a payment gateway, I did India's first payment gateway, and my brother and I did that again together. It was called Transecute. It became large from an India standpoint, but I exited that in 2003 because we realized that the problem with it was we were the first mover. We had no choice. In 98, when we started a hosting company, we wanted to start charging our clients online, and we realized that there is no solution. And because there's no solution, we had to go out there and create the solution. So we had to go talk to the banks, we had to go talk to the regulators, we had to get enough things changed for us so that we could collect money from people that wanted to pay us from around the world. So we started a gateway. It was it was a profitable business. It was a growth business. But it wasn't as big because India was a very small market. And a payments company in India from a regulatory standpoint back then, it didn't allow you to sign up merchants from outside India. So it wasn't a global business. So we realized that this business is good and we can make money on it, but we have to exit it because we are spending time on it. And our time is better spent on building something that is global, that is larger, that can scale a lot more, and that's why we exited that business. So the only business that I had the first mover advantage of was the one that, even though it did well, didn't really end up making us much money in comparison.
So why did you choose ad tech? I mean, in Silicon Valley, there are hundreds of ad tech companies.
There are 3,000 plus companies.
Yeah, probably. And VCs don't fund any ad tech companies anymore.
Well, they did fund a lot when I started.
Yeah.
And around the end of 2005, and I'm a numbers guy, I follow, like I said, my core strengths are tech and operational efficiency. Whenever I look at a business, the idea is you have to understand what you're good at. And I was good with tech, and I wanted to do something in internet tech. I started breaking down, and I like running businesses. So I started breaking down every industry that was online on the internet and started understanding what is the size of the industry today globally and what will it grow to long term. And the largest industry then was online advertising. And the second largest industry then was mass merchants. So companies that sold, e-commerce companies that sold everything. So like your Walmart online, your Sears online, your Amazon, your whatever else. And I knew nothing about logistics. And I knew nothing about offline. I only knew tech and online. So I'm like, I can't do that today. I don't know enough about it. I know tech. Online advertising is the largest industry. How do I get into it? While the hosting business is a good business, it's a much smaller industry online as compared to the online advertising industry. So I came up with a 3-step strategy on how I want to build a large ad tech business. And that applies to any business, right? It's within the industry, once you understand and identify the industry you want to be in, that you want to identify a niche that you can grow in. Because in any large industry, when an industry is large, even though there will be multiple companies in it, if there is lots of dollars in that space, there are enough cohorts of customers that are underserved today. Because companies cannot serve every type of customer in a large space. So no matter how complex or sophisticated a space looks like, or no matter how crowded the space is, to the advice that I was talking about, where a lot of people will tell you there are lots of companies that are already doing this. Everything that we do, keep in mind that we will always be in version 1 of doing, because 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 50 years from now, whatever we are doing today and however we are doing it today is going to change entirely, right? So keeping that in mind, you want to be in a space that has the money, and then pick the niche where you have some edge. So in my case, I've looked at advertising and I'm like, okay, I have no knowledge of online advertising. I'm really good at tech. What can I do? And I was running a domain registration company that was successful. I knew everything about domains. So I started a domain advertising company, a very small niche within online advertising. Because it was a 3-step strategy that was pick a niche, become big in the niche, use the position that you have in the niche that you become big in to go mainstream, become big in mainstream, use that position to vertically and horizontally grow into everything within that industry. Good software takes years to build. Large platforms take years to build. And that generally, over time, will become the moat of why you will be successful or why you will have an edge over everybody else long term. But to do that, especially when I started, when I bootstrapped all of these companies, right? So I always started with very little cash. So the idea was, how do you, with very little cash, keep growing it? And the way to do that, from my perspective, was in that space, in that niche, the original niche, identify within that niche what is the MVP that I can build within the first month, 2 months, 3 months, for which I can find a set of customers who will pay me, that will fund the next set of features and functions, and then that will fund the next set of features, and go on and on and on, where we can keep building the business profitably. And that strategy worked. We became, in domain advertising, we became the fastest growing company worldwide in year 1, year 2. That business was valued at, by end of, I think in 2.5 years, right, they grew it from an initial capital of maybe about $15,000 to a business that was valued at about $225, $250 million. And then, you know, we're just like everyone has failures. I'll talk about this one. That industry was a small industry. In 2006 and 2007, it grew very rapidly. End of 2007, it became a $2 billion industry, that niche within all of online advertising. And today, it is now a $200 billion industry. So it lost 90% of the revenue in that space entirely. So when the crash of 2008 happened, it started crashing every year, and it basically went down to almost nothing. Now, we are the largest company in that space, so while that was happening, we kept losing. So we had grown it to a very profitable business. We started declining in profits, but not market share. So we realized that everybody else will, because it's now declining, will want to exit it. So we started buying others for pennies on the dollar, or we started taking over their customers for a much lower amount. But the strategy was never to be just in that one niche. It was use that niche and go mainstream. So we used that niche, we used our position in that niche to create the relationships that we needed to go mainstream with contextual advertising. And that's what we did in 2010. I started Media.net in 2010. Went mainstream. I was told by everybody that everybody's tried contextual advertising. Other than Google, everybody's failed at contextual advertising. So we're like, yeah, we think that, again, we have core strengths that we can apply here. And we applied those, and we were able to scale it. And then we were not only able to scale it from a mainstream standpoint, we then started building horizontally and vertically across the entire industry to do what earlier this year was the 3rd largest ad tech transaction ever. And as part of that, we will soon be public in the China markets as part of a Chinese company called Metano, where Media.net will still be the largest part of the public entity. And that will make us, within the next 90 days, when this happens, we don't know the exact date, that will make us, I think, the 2nd largest ad tech company globally.
So this formula that you talked about, that identify a niche where you have some advantage, and then pivot that, use that to move to a mainstream, and then grow from mainstream vertically and horizontally. You think that applies to pretty much all the big segments?
It applies to everything, right? Because you have to have focus. If you decide to go mainstream directly, you have lots of competition. You will take a lot more investment to get to a point where you're profitable. Folks will have more money than you, and they have better margins than you have, because you will have initial higher costs. So you have to find the cohorts of customers that are underserved, that will pay you for that functionality, which will then allow you to grow large enough and get that scale, which allows you to go mainstream. Because if you do it just without that, your probability of failure increases dramatically.
Now, you never considered venture funding?
We never got. I was 14 when I first started, so I didn't know what venture funding was. So I think that worked out to an advantage in some form. Also, 98, the venture community wasn't big on India. I mean, there was .com 1, and people did get funded a lot, but I was 16, 17, 18. I did host the majority of the large portals in India. I didn't understand their business models, and I kept saying, I don't understand why these companies exist. So let's not just focus on serving these customers. Let's find corporates who will continue to pay us because we know where their paycheck is coming from. We know how they're making money. And that understanding and that strategy worked out well for us, because when the .com 1 bust happened, we saw a decrease in revenue from that segment, but because we had gone heavy on corporate segment globally, not just India, we were able to double every year during the bust in terms of revenues and growth. And
you think that this model that you had can apply to any segment? They don't need to raise venture funding?
I don't think that is true at all. There are many industry sectors that you cannot possibly do without raising venture funding. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with venture funding. In fact, there are several projects that we will continue to do at our scale and size that we might bring on other partners, simply because after a certain size and scale, especially if you want to deploy that much capital, you want to diversify your capital into different buckets, and that's just capital allocation and risk allocation. And in several of these industry verticals, some of these Ps and VCs could bring in relationships that you don't have, and there could be advantages. We just didn't happen to go down that route, except for once where we didn't take it as PE money from an investment primary standpoint. When I was running the domain advertising business and it was scaling, we got a lot of inbound interest, and we got interest to sell the business entirely, and we could have done that. And one of the options was taking PE money, but we didn't need the money because the business was making, at that time, $2 million of profit after tax every month. So it was, that scale, it had become a decent size. It was valued at $225, $250 million. So what we did at that point in time was we didn't raise money. We had a PE fund buy out a part of that business, and then we bought them back later on. And the reason we did that was, throughout my years, I had never raised funding, and I was always told by everyone, you need a financial partner on board. And these financial folks love saying that. And you almost, they're so good at it, I got convinced. I'm like, yeah, I do need you. I don't know why I need you yet, but I do need you. So please come on and help me.
But you do think that in most cases, it's possible to do without venture funding?
I'm not saying that in several cases it is possible, and in several cases it is not possible.
And the recipe would be build a minimum viable product, find customers.
I think even if you're VC funded, you should build a minimum viable product. Just because someone gives you money doesn't mean you spend their money however you feel like. At the end of the day, in fact, it is in your interest to do it that way. Build a minimum viable product and roll something out as soon as possible. We upload every day, even today, every day. We have a large dev team that builds something and works on stuff. Our dev processes involve, we don't work on something for 2 years and then basically launch it. We upload literally every day. So, and that's important. If you don't do that, then you're not going to grow, and it's in your interest. So if you raise VC money, or you raise P money, let's say you raise Series A, B, C, D, E, whatever, you're on Z right now. One, you've diluted yourself. which is fine if you've scaled enough. 2% of, big business is bigger than 100% of a much smaller business. Completely okay. But if you didn't spend the money smart enough and didn't continue to grow it and scale it, you have so much liquidation preference ahead of you. And now I'm getting technical. I'm sure several of you understand it and some of you don't. You have so much liquidation preference ahead of you that there's misalignment of interests in the business. And if you have misaligned interest in your capital structure, you have a problem because now the management doesn't want to exit, even if you are getting a decent price, which the PE funds are okay with because they're getting, let's say, 2 times or 3 times or whatever. The management team isn't making anything because of some sort of a ratchet structure that was there or whatever else. So somehow what you need to do is run the business as if all the money is yours, and you should do that anyways. Run the money as if that is the last amount of money that you can raise, and then figure out how to get to profitability very quickly. And if at any point of time in your lifespan of running the business, if you don't know where the profits are coming from or where the profits are going to come from, please stop running that business. You're better off taking that money and putting it on red on roulette. Because at least there you have a 47.4% chance of winning as compared to running a business, not knowing how you're going to make profits ever, and hoping that someday somebody will buy you for a multiple of your revenues, or for this user base that you built that you have no idea how you're going to monetize.
So you never build WhatsApp?
Yes, that's a $19 billion opportunity that I would have never understood.
Okay, good.
But I would say that is not necessarily the case. My brother gets it.
Okay.
So we started a startup called Flock. But again, it's not WhatsApp because it's not. It's more for enterprises. It's enterprise chat. So it's more like Slack than WhatsApp, and it's doing really well. Because again, we understand where you have to charge a customer for using the application. The WhatsApp model works, but there's one WhatsApp, and if you look at on the other side, if you look at the top 5,000 public companies, they all make profits.
They all make profits, that's true. So tell me, you moved to Dubai. There are not that many globally successful companies out of India. And I don't know if your company we called an Indian company. But you also felt that you needed to move to Dubai because you're running a global business.
So firstly, there are lots of globally successful entrepreneurs that come out of India. Right?
That's true.
India is produced some significantly smart people. And the advantage we have is I don't want to say that we're smarter than, the Europeans or the other Asians or the North Americans. I think humans are smart. And the top 1% of any country is the top 1%, and that's a really smart lot. We have 1 billion people, so our 1% is just larger in number. And we should leverage that, right? It doesn't matter where we are based out of. When I started running my first business from an opportunistic standpoint, I found that the market in India was very small, and the revenue that we were generating was really from outside the country in the businesses that we were focused on. And hence, it made sense for us to follow the money and be where the money is. In being out of India and running that then had a significant set of complicated challenges. And I'll give you some examples. We wanted to collect money in India. We didn't have a payment gateway option. We had to build our own payment gateway. We built our own payment gateway. We could charge only in INR, which means that now my customer from Germany, even though I'm showing this really cool price of 9.99 euros, or my customer in the US, I'm showing them the right price, which is like the right marketing price. When they see the charge on the credit card bill, they see some random number because there's some currency conversion charge that's applied by 3 layers in the middle, and that's not the best customer experience, right? So then there were multiple different kinds of challenges that we faced trying to do that, and we realized that we just need to be local to whatever country that we're working with, or be in locations that allow us to be local globally easily. We need to make it easier to do business. There are many businesses that are India-centric and India-focused. You have to do them out of India, and your competition also has to do them out of India, which is completely good then. But if you're working in a global environment and your competition doesn't have the same set of challenges that you do, then their cost structure is different. Their time frames to implement stuff is different. And you want to have all the advantages that everyone else has. And hence, as an entrepreneur, don't fix yourself to one country. Look at every location and figure out what's best for your business in what's best for sourcing for yourself, right? Apple doesn't build iPhones in the US, Apple builds iPhones in China. And there's a reason for that. You have to figure out what makes the most sense from a global standpoint for you in whatever business that you're running. How do you optimize it globally to give you the maximum amount of advantages that everybody else is going to leverage anyways? Because even if they're not doing it today, they will do it tomorrow. So if today you feel like, oh, nobody's doing it and it's okay, you're going to lose out tomorrow on it. So you need to figure out what makes sense, and that sort of made sense for us, so we did that.
Will, are there mics on the audience? I think I'll ask the last question, then we'll open up for some questioning. So last question, you have some really dangerous, very risky kind of hobbies.
I don't. I mean, they seem risky to you. They're not really.
You do aerobatic flying.
I do aerobatic flying, which is a lot of fun.
I don't know how many of you remember. Those older people will remember. Sanjay Gandhi died. You see, doing one of those crazy aerobatic kind of a flying thing.
Look, I mean, are there risks in everything that you do? There are risks in everything that you do. I think, like business, there is a difference between perceived risk and real risk, and that difference is bridged by information and knowing more, by practice, and then by knowing what the parameters are. So yeah, I do aerobatic flying. For those of you who have not tried it, it's the best thing ever. So yeah, I do things like hammerheads, loops, spins, inverted flat spins, low flying, inverted low flying, and they're all incredible. It's like it's the best roller coaster ride you've ever had. But at the same time, I know when I do it, one, I trained with the best. I trained with U.S. national champions, world aerobatic champions, and some of the best airshow people globally. I know just like in business, you have a backup plan, and a backup plan of a backup plan, and a backup plan of a backup plan, and you know all the parameters. You have to do the same thing in aerobatic flying, because the risk is, yes, I mean, if you're low and you do something stupid, you die. But if you take care of everything, the risk is no different than you driving, in New Delhi. So,
okay, all right. Any questions from the audience? Yes, please.
Yes, there's one. Hello.
Okay. Yeah, please go to the mic.
Yes, I am at the mic already. Divyank, I am extremely inspired by your bootstrapped approach of building your business, and that's how we've also built our business. It's 1.5 year old, and we've generated 1.5 CR revenue. Now we've created a new product, which is a good story in itself. But the crux of the story is that we are getting a lot of investor interest, and a lot of people are advising us to raise funds, when our core story has always been growing the bootstrapped way, without capital infusion, external capital infusion. So if you were in my position, and you have been in my position, what would you have done?
So I don't know your position exactly. There is nothing wrong with getting capital. If you think that you can use that capital to grow faster, you need to do your model such that figure out that if I raise $5 million and in the next 5 years, in the next 10 years, will that have helped me generate more money as compared to not raising it and continuing to bootstrap it and grow it from internal profits? It's a math calculation that you have to do every time that you have that option. And you should do it once a year, right? You should do it once a year to figure out, if I had access to a lot more capital, then could I do more? If you really believe in your business, then the first question you should ask is, can I get debt capital? Because it's not equity, it's at a fixed interest rate. The folks that are willing to invest in you want, if you understand general VC funds or PE funds, they're targeting somewhere around a 30% IRR. The way that they're going to get to that 30% IRR is they're going to make 10 bets. Out of those 10 bets, they expect a few of those bets to do really well. They expect each one to do really well, and that's the model. And they're hoping that you will be the one that will make them a multiple, and somebody will basically lose them all the money. But they'll average out to that 20-30% IRR range, while debt is much cheaper. So if you can get debt, go for debt first. If you can't get debt, and you think that you can grow faster with equity and more investments, again, there's nothing wrong with it. There's nothing wrong with dilution because as we spoke about it, 2% of something much larger is much bigger than 100% of, a much smaller company.
Can I connect with you offline to explain to you the model better?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear the question.
Is there a possibility where I can connect with you offline to probably tell you about the model deeper?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Next one.
Hi. Hello. Yeah. Hi, Divyank. Here, on your left.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Hi. Yeah. Hi.
Yeah. So I'm Abhishek, co-founder of Alterna Care, which is a 24/7 virtual clinic. I'm also a graduate from Delhi College of Engineering. In 2013, on the 4th day of our placement, 2 companies came. One was Amazon, the second was TiE, your company. Amazon offered almost 1.5 times the offer which was given by your company. However, most of the students, they preferred joining your company. And then, this is one thing. After a year, when I met my friends who were working in TiE and my friends who were working in Amazon, the satisfaction rate was almost similar. Now, the current scenario that, holding the tech talent in a company is very, very challenging. Especially the rate, the rate of funding these days. So what do you have to give? What are your suggestions to hold that tech talent these days at a lower or even a competitive market?
Sure.
Price?
So let me break that up into a couple of things for you because there are a few questions here. The first one is Amazon paid more than TiE? Maybe not. Because once you start looking at how some of these companies break the comp structure and you start looking at the benefits section and you see cash on hand, and not just this year but across the next 5 years, you will generally find that whoever is joined TiE has ended up making more money long term than that have joined Amazon. In fact, I'm quite certain that out of India, we've created more millionaires than Amazon has. The second part of it is how do you retain talent, and that's really important, especially as a products company. Anyone that runs a products company. So if you're running a services company, it doesn't matter because the margin that you make is from the number of bodies that you have, and you're making an arbitrage. It's a great business. If you're in it, you don't have to worry about it as much. You still have to worry about it, but not as much as product companies. If you're a products company, keep in mind that it is more important for you, firstly, not to necessarily get the best guy in the room. So you go to a college, you want the best guy. Everybody wants the best guy. We can all pay for the best guy. But it's far more important for you as a products company that you want the 7th smartest guy in the room that will stay with you for the next 5 or 10 years as compared to the smartest guy in the room that will stay with you for a year, because that other guy is going to add far more amount of value over the long period of time. People stay in companies. One, obviously everybody wants the right amount of comp. So no matter who you are, whether you're TiE, whether you're Google, whether you're Amazon India, whether you're Facebook, we have to all be in the same range. We have to be in that top percentile. But the differentiating factor for keeping the people is once you are in the same band, it's going to be, are they growing with you and are they learning from you? If they're not growing or if they're not learning, they're going to leave. If they're growing and they're learning, they're going to stay. Talking about attrition rates, I'll give you ours in Media.net. Also, it depends on which division, right? Because there are certain departments where the attrition rate is naturally higher and it's okay to have that churn, like your call center. So if you have a back office operation, typically call center operations have a 100% churn rate. And it's kind of okay because people get bored of doing the same monotonous tasks. It's very easy to rehire. It's very easy to train. And it's not okay in certain, especially for certain functions within your modules. You want the same guy to have worked on it for, or the same girl to have worked on it for 5-6 years to add true value. They might not be as valuable to any other company, but to your company they might be worth 3x more. And you'll be able to compensate them that difference because they're that valuable to you. So if you look at our numbers, we have in Media.net overall, globally, we have about 36 people in our management team that is an associate director and higher across the last, from 2010 to now. We've lost 2 people out of the 36. If we look at our tech band, we have a 16% attrition rate, which is really low in comparison to the rest of the space. Then within that, if you look at the people that have been with us for longer, the longer that you've been with us, you are at, we've made sure that you continue to learn, grow, and see that scale. that you will continue to be with us for the longer period of time. So we see the maximum amount of attrition in that 16% in year 1 to 3. The biggest reason that we've seen is generally when we hire out of campuses, it's people have gone for further education. So that's been the number one reason. The number two reason is they've gone and started their own startups, which is great for us because we feel like we're adding to the ecosystem and to the startup ecosystem here in some form. So there are a lot of people who are ex-TiE that basically have gone out and done some cool things themselves, and we encourage it. And then it is basically something else. And sometimes what happens is the person was really good, but wasn't the right fit for your company, or could add more value in another company than your company. And if that's the case, then they're going to make more with somebody else. But what you need to do is look at the 90-10. 90% of the times you need to try and get that right, and 10% of the times you're going to make that mistake, and that's okay. Because if you get it right 100% of the time, it means that you're spending too much time on it, which means you spend too much money on that decision. So always try and get that failure rate to at least be in the 10-20% range, because else you're spending too much time taking that decision.
Great. We are running out of time, so we'll take two more questions, one from here and one from there.
All right. I have a small question. I'm an investor. I got really excited about your acrobatic flying. So what's the way to go about it?
So very quickly, I always wanted to fly. I didn't know where to start or how to do it. And I figured that I learned how to drive because I have a car. So I went out and bought a plane. I'm like, oh, my plane is coming. I better learn how to fly. So I did something called accelerated. I did a very accelerated program. So again, I did a global search for who will teach me how to fly a plane the fastest. And I figured that you can do that only in the US. And so I called multiple schools, and they all said, we have this amazing accelerated program. It takes 30 days. Like, I don't have 30 days.
Yeah.
So then I called a bunch of them, and I found this one school in Santa Monica, and they said, yeah, we have an accelerated program. And I'm like, no, I need it really accelerated. So they're like, okay, we have this guy. We don't know how, we don't know how much time you will take to learn. I'm like, I will learn. I'll put in the hours. So they're like, we have this crazy guy who will put in as many hours as you put in, as long as you're willing to do it. And I did I got my private pilot license, start to finish, in 9 days.
Wow, that's amazing.
It is the stupidest way to learn how to fly a plane. You're not safe at all. Please do not learn it like that.
I'm trying.
Take your time, right? And I did that again with my instrument rating. I did that start to finish in 8 days.
Yeah.
And then I did my aerobatics out of King City. I did it with Sean Tucker, who's a world aerobatic champion. It took 5 days to do that.
So by the way, he is not married. So he has no wife who complains about it.
Me too.
And his mother used to be a national level basketball player, so she encourages him to be adventurous.
Oh. Yeah. So my mom was always like, do crazy stuff. So.
All right. Last question from that side.
Yeah.
Hi, Divyank. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I'm a big entrepreneur fan of yours.
We can't hear you. Yeah.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, great. So I'm a big entrepreneur fan of yours.
Come closer to the mic.
So I'm a big entrepreneur fan of yours. I follow you on Facebook, and I've been reading about your story. So I've been working on a startup idea, and this is my question to you. When you look up starting a company, and you need partnerships for the product or the services you'll be able to provide to them, do you start? So in your case, when you're talking about Yahoo, Cosmopolitan. So when you talk about big fish, when you're talking about small fish, when you're starting out, do you talk to in the beginning, do you start with partnership with small people, small companies, or in the beginning you just approach to okay, I'm very ambitious, so I'll just hit the big guys. So what do you think?
So firstly, I mean, when you're starting a startup and you start thinking about it, just start. Don't wait for I need to perfect my plan. Because there's no perfect plan, and whatever plan you make, you're going to change every 6 months anyways. And if you don't, then you're going to die as a startup. So get started. So that would be my first bit of advice, because that generally takes the longest time to get over. In terms of deal making, you always have to bring value. If you think you can bring value to a large corporation, and you can, there's nothing wrong. It's not that small companies cannot bring value to large companies. In fact, I think small companies sometimes get scared of it, but not in the smartest form. Because if you take a really large company, I'll give you an example. You take a large company, let's say it has 10,000 people. There are so many groups that have so many things that are needed. There are so many problems that need to be solved. There's a lot of money out there, but they don't get internal access to tech resources to get it done. If you are an expert in that area and can fix that problem for them, that large company could end up funding your minimum viable product in some form. And you could basically, you might have to raise a much lesser amount of money because you have a large customer that's willing to come on board so that you can solve it for them. You obviously have to convince them that you are an expert in that field. Because when they're looking at getting that problem solved, they're either looking internally and they're hiring people such as yourself. So if you basically are as good, then it's the same thing whether it's internal or external from their perspective. Especially the larger the company, the easier that is to do. The more mid-sized the company, the more the mentality is let's kind of do it internally. Then, of course, if you can start with small customers and that's what you want to start with because you're more comfortable with that or you want to, you think that that makes more sense for you. I don't know your specific plan, but you can do that. But you can do either is what I'm saying.
Okay, guys. One small question if you're okay. One small question if you're okay.
Go ahead.
All right. My name is Prakash Gupta. I'm from Technosource, Australia. I came to know that you recently made a lot of money as well. What keeps you going and what's your ultimate goal of your life?
I think there is no ultimate goal. Like life is about the journey. It's never about a destination. So if you set up the destination and say this is it, and all my life I'm going to get here, when you get there, you'll find that getting there, the path to it brought you a lot of happiness. By the time that you're getting close to it, you're already bored of that problem as a human being, and you want to solve the next big thing. I mean, it's not just the deal that I did recently. I mean, I grew up in a standard Indian middle-class family, but when I was 14 and I was making great amount of pocket money, that amount of money was a lot for me because as a 14-year-old kid, that was amazing. It was more disposable income than, most of my friends. And I was happy with that. I could have stopped then. Or when I was 18, I made my first million, I could have stopped then. Or when I was 23 and I made my first 100 million, I could have stopped then. The idea is, it's the path. To me, what makes me happy is I like solving tech problems. I love building businesses. I love scale and growth. And I love for them to become, I don't like doing the same thing over and over again. And most people don't. You want to learn, you want to evolve, you want it to be larger. And the larger it is, scale automatically gets you a new set of challenges that you want to go out there and solve for. And if you wouldn't do this, what else would you do? If the answer is yes, I want to do this, and that something could be I want to spend time with my family, I want to go play cricket, I want to do whatever else. There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, the idea is you have one life. The purpose of your life should be what will make me the most happy all throughout my life. And it's not a number that is ever going to make you happy at any point of time, ever. So my goal right now is I will continue doing what I do for now because I love doing it. At some point of time, both Bhavin, my brother and I have said that we'd love solving social problems, but today we like solving business problems. At some point when we stop solving the business problems, we will spend all our time solving the social problems.
All right. That's a very good answer. That's right.
No, I think we're done. I think we're done here. So, guys, if you just heard from an amazing 34-year-old billionaire who has been in business, 7 companies from the age of 14. Please give him a round of applause.
And with that, ladies and gentlemen, we bring the curtains down on the first ever TiE Global Summit. I hope you enjoyed it and had a good time. Before you leave, I'd like to just take 1 minute and thank Divyank and Saurabh Srivastava for leading the effort from the front. And Hitesh Oberoi, may I please call him the chair of the organizing committee who's helped put it together with a lot of other global charter members as well.
Thank you everyone for being here for the last 2 days. You've been a great audience. I just want to take 1 minute and let us all join in to sort of recognize the hard work put in by the TiE Delhi team, led by Geetika Dayal, who has made, this team has worked tirelessly for the last few weeks actually to make this event possible. Please give them a big hand. Geetika, would you like to call your team on stage?
Please.
Yeah.
May I please request the rocking TiE Delhi team to come up on stage? It's been their show. I'd also like to request Vijay Menon, TiE Global ED, to please join us on stage, and all the EDs and staff of other chapters who have supported this effort throughout. Jay, I see you here. Please join us. Chennai, Hyderabad, UP, Pune, Hubli, Coimbatore, we have representation from all our chapters and we'd like to see them on stage here. They really deserve, they worked really hard and I'm so proud of them. If there are any volunteers of the summit who have been working with us here in the room, dear TiE volunteers, a big thank you and please join us on stage.